Coming up, Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews is on, and we'll be looking at Frankenhooker, the Frank Henenlotter film. So great to get some more horror in the film. And also, Freddie Young, we last had him on back in 10 years ago in the older iteration of the podcast, and that was one of the episodes that we lost when Talk Shoe had the server meltdown. So going to try to get that old episode back up at some point, but this is him on again, for the first time in 10 years, and we were talking Frankenhooker. So it was a really fun conversation there. One of the interesting things we talk about in this episode, I mentioned that the town where the scenes in North Jersey take place, and it's Ho-Hocus, spelled Ho-Ho-Kis. So I mentioned that maybe that's Henenlotter's version of Hoboken, but no, there's actually a Ho-Hocus. It's on the New Jersey Transit line. So I don't know which line it's on, but you can get the New Jersey Transit train from there into the city. So that's apparently what Frankenhooker took getting into the city. But yeah, so great conversation there. Of course, Freddie being from New York City, he gives a lot of great context for a lot of the scenes that we see in New York City, especially at Times Square in the 1980s. So a lot of fun there. And that does it for the month of April for us. So we get into May. We've got some great episodes coming up as well. So we've got Tom Joliffe, a screenwriter who we've had on to talk about his movies before, like When Darkness Falls or Renegades. But then also we've had him on to talk about other films, right? Like The Joshua Tree, aka Army of One, Drive. We had some Rothrock films. So he's been on to talk about some different things before. Well, he's coming on to talk about his newest movie that he wrote, Cinderella's Revenge, which was produced by Mark L. Lester of Showdown in Little Tokyo and Commando fame. So it was one that I was actually able to see. It was playing here in a theater out in the suburbs in Warrington, Pennsylvania. But a Regal Cinema, so a commercial cinema chain, one of the big ones in Regal, was playing the movie, so I got to see it here. So I hope to have him on soon to discuss that movie. Then some other May episodes that we've got. Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. He's going to be on to talk about Crackerjack 2. So a really great conversation there as we talk about just the mere concept of Judge Reinhold as an action star. So a lot of fun there. Ty from Guppins is back on. We'll be looking at 2 Michael Madsen films as what we'll call our Madsen Mayhem episodes. We'll be looking at Assault on Hill 400, which ended up being an asylum film. We didn't realize it was. And then Machine, a movie that he did with people like Neil McDonough. So really interesting movie there that from back in 2007. It's probably the oldest movie we've been doing in this series of films. So that'll be coming out in May as well. Then Will from Exploding Helicopter is on. We're going to be looking at the old and the new Roadhouse movies. So really interesting and fun conversation there as we talk about kind of the cult classic original Roadhouse, and then the new one that's streaming on Amazon. And then we also do have some episodes lined up for June already. Sean Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time. We'll be talking more Seagal with him. And then Ty from Guppins also for his monthly spot. We're looking at some Dermot Mulrooney. So, we've come across him a couple times so far and thought we might do an episode, especially since one of his newest ones, Ruthless, was directed by Art Camacho. So we've been looking to do that one for a bit, and it's finally available on Hulu. So I think it'd be good for us to chat about Art Camacho film anyway, but we thought we'd give Dermot Mulrooney an episode, so that should be fun. We will be getting back into some Willis at some point too. Sometimes we just have to take a break from the Bruce Willis. It can be a little bit arduous there, but so that's kind of May into June for us there on the podcast. Then, of course, DTVC Extra. This month we'll be looking at the John Wick movies. So probably 9th and 23rd is when you can expect those episodes. So 9th will be movies 1 and 2, and then the 23rd will be the 3rd and 4th movies, which I haven't seen the 4th one yet, so that'll be good to get that one in finally. And then in terms of the site, we've got 3 Kinds of Heat coming this weekend. So that's a Robert Ginty movie that I've been meaning to do for a while now. I think it's a Canon film as well. I watched it a couple years ago when we did the Ginty Moore Beef Stew episode on the podcast. It was one that Ty and his brother Brett were both on for, where we were doing our top 5 Ginty movies. Well, I watched it for that, went to review it, and then it was removed from free streaming sites. So it's finally back. It's on Amazon Prime, so we'll look to do that one. And then, if you go to the Letterboxd page, you'll see that I have a list called upcoming reviews, and then in parentheses watched. That gives you a sense of what's coming. But the next one after that is The Weapon, a Tony Sheena film. I don't know if I'm going to do that one because I've got a few on my watch list, which that one's actually called Watch List. That's another Letterboxd list that I created. It gives you a sense of what's going to be coming up soon. 3 movies that have been on my radar that I'm going to look to do soon. One is The Gardener. Gary Daniels film that's finally available on a free streamer. It's been to rent for so long. Finally, Tubi's got it. So look to probably do that one. It's got Bronzy, right? The guy, the kind of like the guy who looks like Charles Bronson. So yeah, it should be a real interesting one. But that I think will also be 60 tags for Gary Daniels. So hopefully we'll get that one in soon. Also, Shepherd Code. I think that's what it's called. It's a Don the Dragon Wilson movie that's on Tubi. Which if you go on Letterboxd, the people who made it, they don't even have a cover image for their Letterboxd entry. So yeah, that should be an interesting one. Also, Showdown at the Grand, Dolph Lundgren movie. That one is available on Pluto. So I've been meaning to watch that one. So some movies that are in the hopper, or sort of on the list there to watch that we might do before we do The Weapon. So just keep an eye on the Letterboxd spaces. You'll see what we've got coming, and of course always subject to change as we say there. Yeah, I think that's everything there. So good, cool 6-minute introduction there. I think will get us over the top here and get into our movie here. So why don't we have John Cross from After Movie Diner, Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures. Also of note, this Friday is another Bandcamp Friday. So great time to go on to Bandcamp and buy some Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures albums. Some really great ones there. Truer Crime is one that I really enjoy of his. Also, he's got 2 Donald Pleasance albums. So albums with songs based on Donald Pleasance. One, the more recent of the 2 of those, he has a great one where he talks about the episode where, or the Columbo episode where Donald Pleasance was on. So yeah, great albums there. So again, Miscellaneous Plumbing Fixtures and After Movie Diner is his podcast. But he does our theme song. So we'll have him do our theme song here. And then when we come back, Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews will be on. And we'll be looking at Frankenhooker. All right, we are back, and I'm joined by a very special guest. We've got Freddie Young from Full Moon Reviews. Well, welcome back, Freddie.
It's been a long time, man. How you doing?
It's good. I know it's been a while. Like it's amazing because yeah, you were on in the very earliest iteration of the podcast when I was with Jamie. We would do it on Mixler. We do it live and everything.
Yeah, I actually checked today, like how long it's been.
Yeah.
It was July 2014.
Yes, and I have to get those. So what happened was with those 2014 episodes was the company or the site that I was putting the episodes up with, TalkShoe, they had a server meltdown and I lost all of the 2014 episodes. So I have them. I just have to I'm slowly kind of getting them back onto the site. So that earliest episode that you were on, I think I got through to like September. So I still haven't gotten to July yet.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we did a great one. Then we did Reanimator. So kind of we're doing another horror classic here.
Yeah, I'm like, we always come together to talk about cult directors, their films, and about people getting reanimated and doing some weird sex crap.
Exactly.
I don't know what's going on between us, dude.
Right, exactly. Because I didn't even think of that with Reanimators. Kind of some similar stuff going on there
Yeah,
for
very
sure.
sleazy movies.
Yes, exactly. Now I know you're a big fan of horror. I mean, I think you're a fan of all genres, but a lot of times I'll see you on Twitter when Joe Bob Briggs is doing his was it Friday? It's the drive-in show. I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, the last drive with Joe Bob. Yeah.
Last drive, yeah, exactly. So I'll see you on there, and I'll be like, "Oh man, yeah, I forgot that was on tonight." So, yeah, and he kind of still does. I think he had something. I can't remember what he said about the movie we're going to be talking about, Frankenhooker, but I want to say he was a fan of it.
He did do a show for it 2 years ago. It was a Valentine's Day episode. Yeah, one of those films you go, yeah, Valentine's Day, dude. Sure. But we'll get into it, like how messed up this whole situation is. But Yeah, I love watching him because he really talks about films that I love that no one really talks about, and new films that I've never seen, like I never really thought about watching. So I watch it through him, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's really great that he's even still doing that kind of thing, because there aren't I mean, Sven Gulli kind of he has a like a Twitter presence when he does his Saturday night stuff. But yeah, it's cool that he's doing that and kind of like you said, like kind of showing some of these movies that like you said, there's some that you wouldn't even think to watch if it wasn't for him.
Like the last one he showed was Rotten Tail, the Easter Bunny one. I was like, what is this? And it was just as a never in my dreams would I have ever sought that out. And it was
Right.
just it was bad, but it was like a fun bad.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, which I think is a fun bad, right? There's always that difference, right, between a good bad and a fun bad. Like I remember way back, I was like 2011 when you and I we had kind of like a friendly bet between our sites for the Super Bowl. That was when the Patriots were playing the Giants for the second time in the
yeah, right.
Super Bowl, and I lost because the Patriots lost, and so I had to review. Was it? Do you want to keep us or
Do you want
do
to
you
keep a
want to know a
secret?
secret? Yeah,
Yeah.
do you want to know a secret, right? With where Joey Lawrence was Joseph Lawrence, and
So
yeah,
bad.
yeah, exactly. It's like that was kind of a bad kind of bad.
Yeah. I still remember that review that I did. One of the actress's sisters like ranted against me. She was like trying to get me canceled.
Right?
And I was just
Wow.
like, your movie sucked.
Yes.
What do you want me to
Yeah,
say?
yeah, that's the thing. It's what that's the thing nowadays. Well, I mean, that's kind of always been the case. I remember I did a review where I made a comment about the actress getting naked, because the producer was like, "Oh, she's getting naked for because the for her character, right?" It's like the character
Mhm.
called for that. I was like, "Get out, get out of here! Nobody believes that, you know." And he got mad at me for that, and kind of, I think it's interesting because I think nowadays, if he because this was like, 07, 08, maybe 09, like, before like Twitter and all that had gotten so big. I think if that had happened nowadays, he would have blasted me on Twitter. I think it just kind of don't look at this direct to video connoisseur, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's weird how quickly technology has changed the way we talk about things. Like now you gotta be careful what you say. And it's just like, I don't know. It's just like I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing. I think cancel culture is, it depends on what we're getting canceled over. But it's yeah, it's hard for me like to review things now. I found I have like less motivation to review things now because I'm afraid of what I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
Like if I see a bad movie, I go, do I really want to like really rip this apart? Because if I do, there's a lot of people that worked hard in this movie, and then I start feeling bad about it, and it's just like, I just not bother reviewing anything. I'm just let me move on.
Yeah,
So it's
sometimes
hard.
what you could do is blame the distributor sometimes, or that's or like hey, like almost like there's a way like you can almost like hedge it, right? Where it's like the people that were working on the movie, I understand like this is what they were going for, but it didn't work, or somebody edited it and decided to do this with it. And I don't know why they did that or something. That's what I sometimes try to do myself.
Well, you should try to give your opinion on what you would have done. I would
Right.
have done it this way. Maybe this would have been better. Who knows? But
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard to really review things these days.
Yeah, it's interesting, like as you said, because it's like like you said, sometimes it's being canceled for like I mean if you're Mel Gibson, you probably deserve to be canceled, right, for saying
Right.
the stuff that he said or something like that. But sometimes it's like you give your opinion on a movie, and it's almost like somebody's out there to try to sort of be like I'm going to be the one that kills this thing here, and it's hard. I think like you say, like when you're trying to just be thoughtful and just be like, hey, I didn't like this movie, and it's got this or this wrong with it, and it was a kind of obnoxious, and yeah, I would say kind of the best one that I had was I there's a Fred and Ray did a movie called The Assassination of or something of Jesse James. I can't remember what it was,
Okay.
but it was kind of one of those ones where they essentially said that the South like it was bad that the South lost the Civil War. So it was kind of that kind of vibe to it, which is just really not
Mhm.
good. And I called the movie a disgrace, which was probably a little harsh for it. But I was like, this is a disgrace. What are you talking about? Like, yes, the South did a lot of really bad stuff pre-Civil War, after the Civil War. It's like it's not you can't be idealizing that. It's not good. And then I think I did Dinosaur Island like a couple weeks later, and Fred and Ray responded, and he was like, he commented on the review and said, "It's nice to be known for something good," or something like that, which was his way of telling me I read your other review and just didn't say anything.
Yeah, he's got noticed.
Right,
He's a good
exactly.
guy.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a better way. I know Albert Pyun did that same thing. Like I remember I killed Mean Guns. I think I said like a car commercial director could have done a better job, which I know a lot of people really like that one. And then he started talking to me about other reviews that I did and was like, oh yeah, da, 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 da. Then he was like, hey, could you give Mean Guns another chance? And I was like, sure, I'll give Mean Guns another chance. And I'd forgotten what I wrote in the review when I read it. I was like, man, he could have just written me off forever, and just not done it. So it is interesting like that approach I think is a little bit better than being like I'm just going to blast this person on the internet for a bad review I mean.
Yeah, he was that means he was cool with it. He understands the criticism,
Yeah.
which I wish more people would these days. When it's really tough to be walking on eggshells around things like that.
Yeah, and I think it's that fact too that like you kind of know, especially if it's a low budget thing, that the people making it are probably going to see it because it's like it's going to end up on IMDb, and if you're like one of five people reviewing on IMDb, they're probably going to check the IMDb reviews.
Yeah, sometimes I'll check the IMDb and it's like, oh, only one review. I'm like, oh, do I really want to post this?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, 'cause it helps on the one hand because it's like people are more likely to see your review, but on the other hand, it's like the people who made it are going to see it. So if you don't like it, they're going to read all the things you said that you didn't like.
Yeah, that's when you start talking around it. You go, yeah, I would have done it this way. I mean, I go, it was a low budget movie. I understand there was lot of limitations. It wasn't the best thing, but it wasn't that bad. You got to kind of like make excuses for it sometimes.
Right,
But
exactly. Well, and then there's also like kind of there's that industry. I don't know if you've noticed this as well, like on Tubi and whatnot, where it's almost like an assembly line thing with horror, where it's like
mm,
just attach it to a concept and see how many people will stream it. Where I
right.
almost feel like you can be a little bit harsher on that. Maybe you don't kill the actors or the director, but you can at least be harsh on the distributor on that. I think.
Yeah, when it becomes trendy, yeah, that's when
Right.
it's like, oh, I've seen the movie like 10 times already. Like, come on, let's do something different.
Right. Exactly.
Like
I
at
think
the
there's.
time we just had Texas Chainsaw Massacre ripoffs. I'm like,
Oh
oh
yes.
my
That's
God,
Yeah, I was gonna say that, or I think there's 30 plus Amityville movies on Tubi.
that Hills Have Eyes, a whole bunch of them. Like, oh, you get it.
Yeah, yeah, which is good. I think the movie we'll be talking about here is as original, I think, as it gets for a
Mhm.
movie, for sure. And it's interesting because I've been wanting to talk about this director, Frank Henenlotter, for a good amount of time. And I've been meaning to review this movie, and I think the only ones I think I've reviewed Basket Case and Brain Damage on my site. I haven't seen the sequels to Basket Case, but he's someone I've wanted to talk about for a while.
Yeah, I really dig him. He's from New York, obviously, so I like that vibe. I we were talking about this off air about which film to review. I was like Basket Case or Frankenhooker. I was like, I've done like Basket Case like 3 times. I'm
Right?
like, I've seen this movie so many times. The sequels, they're a mixed bag. I'm just gonna say that. Brain Damage is honestly my favorite in a lot of film. I just love that film from beginning to end. Just the concept of it, the drug addiction, that kind of trope and all that stuff works. Yeah, I really love Frank because he really showcases New York in a very interesting way that almost makes it a character in a way. Um, and I thought watching this recently, I was like, wow, a lot of that stuff's like from Basket Case. That's how New York used to look like back in the day. Now it's all cleaned up. And it's just like it brings you back to a time where things weren't as, conservative and all that like good stuff was going around. It was like really dirty and sleazy, and it had a character to the city, and I like his film for that.
Yeah, it feels like maybe yeah. Tell me if I'm right about this. That Henenlotter used because they always talk about New York as a character in a movie, but I feel like Henenlotter uses New York as a character in a very unique way that's specific to him.
Yeah, it's like it really gives you off an atmosphere. This is not a very like clean cut movie. There's a lot of stuff going around, drug dealing and prostitution and homelessness, and the streets are not cleaned up. It's very dim lighting. It's just like where you are when you're watching one of his movies. Like, oh, this is not going to be one of those happy ending kind of movies. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not like You Got Mail, right? With like Tom
Right.
Hanks and Meg Ryan flouncing around New York, drinking their coffees and hanging out in the park and that kind of thing.
It's not flowers and sunshine. It's very like concrete jungle. Bad things are going to happen in this world. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, exactly. Which I love because for me, I grew up in Maine, and I actually didn't. The first time I even went to New York, it was in it was like November of 2001. We were going
Mhm.
to DC on a trip, and we got the woman who was driving. She got us lost. We ended up in the Bronx, and we had to find our way out of the Bronx. Where we got lost. But that's the only time. That was the first time I'd ever been to New York City, and then. The first time I really saw it was my wife and I were coming from Philly to Boston on the train, and we had a 45-minute layover at Penn Station. And she was like, "Well, why don't I take you to to Times Square?" Because she has family. She had family in New York City. I think they've all passed away at this point because they're older. So she used to come to the city a lot. And she was like, "Yeah, this isn't the Times Square that I knew growing up when we would drive through and stuff like that." And even when she was going to high school in the early '90s and going to like New Year's Eve and stuff like that. But that was like my first experience of it. And there was this sense of like, oh, I've got to like do it. I'm in Times Square. I've got to do it. But there's also that sense of like, I never saw the Times Square that like Henenlotter shows here.
Right, right. Yeah, that's why it reminds me of I've lived here my whole life in New York City. So I remember those like the very grungy train stations and Times Square wasn't all bright like that and cleaned up and there were like cops all over the place. And it's a totally different time and it's just like kind of shocks you, culture shock in a way, like how fast things had changed. Even from like 99, it was already like cleaned up. And it was just like how? How did they do it so fast?
Yeah, because I remember my friends went to New York to see, I think it was a David Bowie concert.
Mm,
I'm not sure where it was, but they were seeing it in New York City, and they talked about going to one of those play like peep show
yeah,
locations in Times
yeah.
Square, and that wouldn't have been long before '99. That would have probably been in like the kind of the mid '90s ish, something like that.
Yeah, those no longer really exist anymore. Those peep shows. That's pretty wild. Yeah, the '90s were all pretty much sex, drugs, and rock and roll in New York. Now it's just like Disney and Sony and these conglomerates pretty much took over.
Right. Yeah, it's like if this movie was made today, right? She would be like going into like Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, like throwing
Yeah,
people out the windows, I guess, or something.
yeah, like Disney World, Disneyland or something. I don't know. It would have been a really different movie.
Yeah,
Like hookers, even hookers are really around. Like it's like online now. It's
right.
like it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember a few years ago, I think it was 2019. I was going to see. I'd always wanted to catch a Mets game just because we live close enough to New York and add that ballpark. And so I took the mega bus and it dropped me in an area that wasn't near where I thought it was supposed to drop me. And so I was trying to find my way to the 7 train to get out to see the Mets. And the only way to do it was to go through Times Square from where I was. I can't remember exactly where, but I had to get through Times Square. And it was funny how like I went that one time with my wife and I was like kind of just trying to take it all in and all of that. And then this other time I was just like, get out of my way. I need to get to it's like it was like too much. I can only imagine living there, how that can be.
It's crazy. It's worse now since after the pandemic. Like it's just now it's crazy here now. Like it's like all free for all, and in a lot of ways, like the what happens in Frankenhooker really kind of feels sort of similar to what's going on now. It's just except that it's more colorful now. That's the only difference, really.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah, no, one other thing about Henenlotter that I like is, Henenlotter, I think he comes from this group of horror directors that, they were born in like kind of like the late 40s, early 50s. I think like Wes Craven's a little older than that. He was kind of born, I think, in like the late 30s, but most of them were in that range there where it's like they grew up watching the 50s horror
Mhm,
movies, which I know
mhm.
this one, he talks about the brain that wouldn't die, Henenlotter, but it's almost like they got those movies in this way that created this kind of horror comedy that we got a lot, whether it's with him, John Carpenter's another I can think of, that's Stuart Gordon, of course, when we did
Yeah,
um yeah, Reanimator. But yeah, there's something about those that I think for people our age, where we grew up with like kind of our first images of horror, a lot of times it was these guys doing this kind of stuff.
yeah, it's pretty much a generational, thing. Like like you watch things now, and it's kind of like the '80s are coming back, the '90s are coming back, so it's kind of like it's just a cycle all over again. Um, it's funny because I don't know if you ever watched Poor Things, the one that just won the Academy Award.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, if you watched that, I watched it in theaters like late last year, and it was like this is a art house version of Frankenhooker. A lot of similar tropes, a lot of similar things that Emma Stone does. It's the same that the actress Patty Mullen does here. It's like facial tics, the way she walks, the similar story about reanimating someone is a lot of sex, this idea of discovery. Who's the bad guy here? Is playing God the right thing to do? It's a very similar vibe. I'm just like, did the director watch Frankenhooker and decide, hey, I'm just make a very sophisticated version of it and make it poor things? It's very bizarre. It's like, yeah, he must have watched this. 'Cause I'm like, the way things are moving in the story are very similar.
Yeah. So I've seen the trailers, so at least like I know the facial tics and the walking, and I didn't
Yeah,
even make that connection. Yeah, I mean the director, right, Yorgos Lanthimos. I remember.
yeah,
I think the
so,
movie he did was Dogtooth that I saw. Yes, that's the one of
yeah.
his that I saw that he did. But yeah, I mean he's born in '73, so I wouldn't be surprised if he grew up, watching these kinds of movies and they influenced his style.
Yeah, it was like watching that. I had a smile on my face because like this is like such a Frank Henenlotter tribute, and it's funny that the critics and the audience embraced it because I was like, this would never fly in the 1990. Like people would bash the hell out of this.
Right. Yeah, I
Plus,
mean,
this is Stone and Willem Dafoe and Mark Ruffalo. Hey, this is cool. This is great acting, and it's a great movie. Um, but I don't know if it's as fun as this movie, but I was very surprised how much it was embraced. And Emma Stone winning an Oscar is just like surprising, like what she does.
yeah. Well, because I guess right, because I guess in this movie, and we'll get into it a little bit more deeply in a bit. But one of the reasons I guess why um, uh, um, Patty Mullen wouldn't have won the Oscar here is that she's not in it enough. I guess.
Yeah,
Whereas Poor Things, or she's in it more.
it's funny rewatching this. I because I hadn't rewatched this in a long time. I'm like the transformation doesn't happen until like 15 minutes into the movie.
Right.
I thought it would happen sooner.
Yeah.
I'm like, when did she become the monster? I'm like more than half the movie has passed at this point.
Right. Right. Yeah, which is really fascinating because yeah, when you think of like the original Frankenstein, the what the was it 1939? I think that
It was
um
1931.
31 was even earlier. Yeah. I mean, that one, it's like, I guess that one's also kind of, no, it's kind of more the middle of the film, I guess, when he,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's like
yeah,
right before the halfway point.
that's right. Because he's kind of stuck and he kind of keeps him like chained up or something. And then he escapes and he's out there. And yeah, I mean, that scene when he throws the girl in the water is just like,
Mhm.
so,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that kind of happens in this movie too, in a way, if you think about
right.
it.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, maybe we'll get stuck in here. So what I'll do is I'll kind of just give a quick synopsis, and then we'll kind of take it kind of pieces by pieces here. And again, if I skip over a part that you wanted to mention, no worries. Just let me know. We can kind of always go back to cover that part. Um,
Okay, cool.
but the basic premise here is that we've got a character by the name of Jeffrey Franken, played by James Lawrence, which the only thing I knew James Lawrence from was Street Trash, right, where he plays the doorman.
Yep,
Yeah,
that's where I'm moving from.
that's what
He's
you
been in a
said.
lot
Yeah,
of like mob movies
yeah,
recently.
yeah, because I think it's his accent, and he lives
Yeah.
in New York, and I think they do a lot of those mob movies in New York.
hmm I think he was in The Irishman, wasn't he?
He was, yeah, he had a small part in The Irishman as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's still kind of kicking around, but he's this guy who he drops out of med school, but is also like working for the electric company, so he knows a lot about both biology and electricity.
hmm
And he's dating a woman named Elizabeth who she's supposed to be overweight, but really it just looks like she's just wearing a jumpsuit that has like padding in it. And
Like that whole party scene is just bizarre.
right, it
He's
is
talking
just
to this brain with one eye,
yes,
doesn't get it to look at him. I guess Elizabeth's mom is the one that finds him in the kitchen. She doesn't
yes,
want it to be weird. She calls her daughter fat, even though she's a beautiful woman.
right, right.
It's
Okay.
just like, what's going on with this family?
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so then what happens is that Jeffrey he helped her get a present for her dad because they're at the dad's birthday party, and so he helps her get a present by wiring a lawnmower with electricity so that he can use a remote control on it. She's playing with the remote control to show the dad how it works, and it ends up running her over, which of course is all off screen. We don't see it, but that's what happens. Um, and so
It's
then
it's it's one of those moments where I go, "What a stupid character."
exactly,
He's standing right in front of the lawnmower as it moves. What do you think is
right.
going to happen?
Right, and he just keeps yelling, "Get out of the way, get out of the way." So basically, the movie is he is obsessed with putting her back together or getting new body parts where he gets her head, and he's obsessed with creating a new body that he can reanimate. And when he does, he uses hooker parts, and when he does, she is kind of melded with the hooker's mind and goes out kind of out on the streets of New York City. So, yeah, I mean, back at that party scene, there were a few things with that party scene. One, I don't know if this struck you at all, but I a lot of times I'll get like bagged coleslaw mix for like if I make like fried rice or something like that. It's like really good like bait. You just it's got like cabbage and carrots and stuff in it, so it's like a really easy fix to throw in with like some diced onion or something. And when the mom says, because the mom kind of essentially tells Jeffrey to move his brain with an eye out of the way so she can work on getting things ready. She's like, I need to make my coleslaw. And in my head, the first thing I thought was she's just going to put a bag in a bowl. But no, she's like chopping it up. I don't know if some of those things ever strike you where it's like, oh, that's right. There was a time where you couldn't just buy a bag of coleslaw.
No DoorDash, no Grubhub.
Right,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, it's wild watching like movies from back in the day. Go, there's no cell phones, there's no internet. You
Yeah.
know, that makes it more impressive that he created this woman on these parts. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
genius.
Right. Yeah. And when after the death happens, and like you said, it is ridiculous because he's like yelling at her from the picnic table, "Get out of the way, get out of the way." And and she just turns around and screams, and then you just, it cuts away. There's like I think everybody gets covered in blood and they cut away to the
Mhm.
opening credits.
Yeah. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised by a woman who let her fiance staple her stomach just so she could lose it. Like,
I forgot to mention
what?
that part. Yes, that she's
What?
like she's telling her friend, like, oh, he's such a great guy. I've been trying to lose weight, and he stapled my stomach. And she's like, wait, is he a doctor? Well, he dropped out of medical school, and you had him perform surgery on you. Well, yeah, it was okay.
Jesus.
Yeah, right. So you're right. Like Henenlotter establishes early on that she's the kind of person who could potentially get run over by a
Yes.
remote control lawnmower that she's running.
Yeah. She definitely needs a new brain at this point. So.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, in the aftermath, we like you said, we get the opening credits where Jeffrey he's got like this whole like sheet of paper and he's just like mapping out all he needs to do to resurrect her is essentially what his plan is. But like he only has her head. That's the only thing he has to work with.
Can I say like those opening credits are just amazing?
Yes.
That's done. Just him showing him how he's gonna make every part work, the electricity he needs, the drawing on the body. It's just it's sick and it's creepy, but it's just like this guy is so brilliant, and it sets the tone of the rest of the film. Like it's just like it's so well shot, so well directed. Like it might be one of my favorite opening credits of any movie I've seen. It's just really great.
I totally agree with you there. It really gets you into the mode of what this movie is going to be about. And almost too because it's like because she dies like that
Mhm.
it's almost like you're rooting for him to make it work too. Like, but
Yeah,
you know what's going to happen. It's not going to work, but it's still you kind of like that he's like you said, like you like that he's kind of our hero.
yeah. And it's funny following him for most of the movie because he's not really a hero. He
Right.
gets worse and worse as it goes. And it's just like it's very different from Basket Case and Brain Damage because those characters are very like much victims
Right.
of the circumstance, and he's very much not the victim here.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now, as he's working on this stuff, his mom comes in, and of course, actually, before that, he watches the videotape of the news report of the death, which is absolutely fantastic.
Oh my God. One of the best news reports in any movie. Toss human salad.
Right. Right. So they're describing the fact that her body parts are just kind of all over the place, and
A
yeah, the
big jigsaw puzzle, I think they call
right. Yeah, so the police detective was like, it's like a jigsaw puzzle putting her back together, and they're like, what? And then of course it's revealed that some of her body parts are missing, which we know,
it.
of course, we assume that Frank, but that's the other piece of it. It's like, so you're missing some of her body? Yes, unfortunately, we're missing some of the body
Right,
parts.
right.
Oh,
I looked at the news. It's called 8 News Alive. Like, the other like there are dead news report that I need to know about because
yes. And
sure.
and the other thing too, I think it's supposed to take place in Hoboken, but what they call it, Ho-Hocus, I think is what they call
Yeah,
it.
focus, yeah.
Right, exactly. So, and that's the other thing too, because that's unique, right, for Henenlotter, because the other films of his took place in New York City, where this one takes place in
New
both
Jersey.
Jersey and New York.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So when we meet the mom, right? The mom is kind of concerned about her son's obsession with his girlfriend, because it kind of looks like Better Off Dead, right? With
Mm,
John Cusack with the pictures all over the wall, right? And actually, her name's Beth, and this is Elizabeth. So actually, it's kind of a similar thing to have the pictures all over the wall.
right, right. Yeah, mom was played by Louise Lasser. Horror fans probably best know her for being the mom in Blood Rage. And her
Yeah,
crazy performance, yeah.
yeah, and I read here that she had a cold or she was ill or something, and they had to ADR her lines after the fact because, and she also had to read from cue cards because she was so ill she had trouble remembering the lines.
You can kind of tell that she's looking off to the side. It's like, are you really talking to your son or are you talking to a cue card? But no, I like her presence here. I like that he has a caring mom, even though she's kind of maybe a little too caring.
Right,
Like he's kind of like a mama's boy in a way.
right.
And I like that scene with the him and the mom because he's kind of honest about himself. Like he knows he's kind of losing it. He says he's antisocial, he's depressed, he's obsessed, he's amoral, you know. And I like that he's self-aware of himself, that he knows what he's doing is wrong.
Yeah, which will come into play later, right? When he starts
Yeah.
to sort of, we'll talk about how he rationalizes to himself that what he's doing isn't
Hmm.
wrong. Yeah, and then the other thing I love, the little touch here, is when the mom says, "Oh, we've got a sandwich. I can make you a sandwich." And she mentions we've got leftover egg salad, and
Yes.
that seems to always be a hallmark in these kinds of movies, that there's always some kind of gross like salad sandwich or something like that, or like some gross casserole or something
It's like
like that.
the coleslaw earlier in a way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's always something like that. Now we find out the reason why Jeffrey turns down the dinner offer, even though it's as enticing as that egg salad sandwich sounds. Um, he turns it down because he has Elizabeth's head being kept in like some kind of vat of like purple liquid. And he decides he's going to have dinner with her, and he feeds the decapitated head Beaujolais, and he that's when he kind of outlines his plan that he's going to somehow bring her back to life if he just gets the body parts.
This guy is just out of his mind. Talking to her head, having dinner dates, talking about his plans to bring her back, showing her pictures of these like porn star bodies, all nude. Like, oh, you should have this. Oh, you have to have these curves. Look at these boobs. I mean, these look great, don't they? Like, it's just like very like misogynist in a way. Like, he's like, you love this one, but you don't love her body, so I'm just gonna create you a new one. Like, it's
Right, exactly right. It's that idea that like, oh, because she's overweight,
right.
as opposed to because right, as opposed to like anybody would do because we lost your body parts, and it's like no, no, it's got to be a good looking body.
Yeah, he's playing guy. He's gonna make her in his image.
Right, right, exactly. And there's also the idea that he he writes her poetry, so he's like reading a
Oh,
poem to her, and then he puts the poem in the severed arm or hand that she has, and he puts it back into this like again, it's like this like standalone freezer kind of like freezer cabinet
yeah.
kind of thing that he's keeping everything in.
Yeah, it's like how did the mom not know about this section of the house?
Exactly.
She's
And
doing laundry, cleaning around. Like, how do you not check the shed?
right, exactly. Well, and there's also I think Henenlotter said that he's purposely wanted there to be like a 4-to-1 ratio, that like the building from the outside, on the inside it's 4 times larger than it was on
Yeah,
the outside. Yeah.
yeah, I noticed that. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it looks like a small hut, but inside it's like a big like mansion.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's kind of funny because you look at that 2015 Fantastic Four movie. I finally watched that one recently,
Oh God, I'm
and
sorry.
right, and it's like it wants to be taken seriously, and it's essentially doing a serious version of this when it's got two kids like teleporting a Matchbox car or something in almost the same location as this, and
Mm-hmm.
it's saying, "Oh, take me seriously. This is, spend hundreds of millions of dollars watching me in the theater." Um, you definitely know that director didn't see this movie, and if he had, he probably would have said, "Okay, we're going to scrap that altogether."
You never know. He might have seen it when, I'm just gonna make this my way. I'm gonna fix the problem that movie had. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And he just made it worse.
right, exactly. Because that's the thing. It's like you could say that movie. This is an objectively better movie than that movie,
Yes, it
and
is.
it's like 150 versus 1.5 million. I mean, it's like 100 times cheaper to make an objectively better movie.
Because this movie is pretty much like making fun of itself. The Fantastic Four was like very serious. Very, we just want to make money, build a
Right.
franchise, a universe. This is
Yeah.
just like this is a goofy movie about we're ripping off Frankenstein and turning it on his head,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like Frankenstein meets Weird Science in a way. This movie.
Yes. Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, no, so he this is where I think this is the point where we start to learn that he has some other things going on, some other mental issues going on, and
Oh
he's
God. Yeah.
yeah, so he's planning out what he wants to do, and he gets this idea in his head that he's like trying to figure out how he wants to get the body parts for Elizabeth, and he knows he's gonna have to kill some women to do it,
Mhm.
and to come up with he starts to like kind of come up with some idea like, oh, maybe I'll kidnap some stewardesses, I'll go to JFK and grab some stewardess and well, that's not going to work, and he starts to get a little bit crazy about it, so he takes a power drill and based on the brain, he has like these pressure points. It's almost like an acupuncture kind of thing where he drills into a part of his brain that makes him see clearer.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Right? It's so completely outside the realm of whatever else. And it's funny because the movie's crazy enough, right? That he has this idea that he's gonna get body parts and put his girlfriend back together again and make bring her back to life. But then you add the drill piece on top of it, and it's like I don't even know where. I wonder if he watched like an acupuncture thing and just thought, "Hey, I could do this my way."
I guess. I mean, it's so bizarre. I was thinking like Jigsaw would never try to find this guy because he would just win every trap.
Right,
Like, if you
exactly.
could do that to yourself, what else can you do?
Right, right. That's a good
I guess
point.
that was like his way of cutting yourself, like when you kind of have to deal with trauma.
Right.
And like it was so weird. Like how did he not die? How did he not bleed out?
Right, exactly. Right. Well, because when he puts the drill in the first time, he starts like coming up with some ideas, and then he takes the drill out, and he's like, he realizes he needs the drill again. So he's
Yeah.
like, oh, I already bored a hole there, so I can just put it right back in there. It's like, what? And he doesn't bleed either, which I
No.
read that Henenlotter actually did that on purpose because he wanted this to be more of a comedy than a horror
Right.
film. And that's why there wasn't as much blood as you would expect from things like
Yeah.
this, which
We'll talk about it later on with the hookers and what happens to them, but there's no blood really in that scene.
right, right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I wonder if he was going for more of like a Three Stooges thing, because like the Three Stooges would do things like that to each other, there'd be no blood.
Yeah.
Oh, so he decides he needs to get the bodies of hookers. And so, he hops in his car and again, yeah, for younger people out there listening, if you were looking for hookers at night in New York City, Times Square is where you would actually go for that kind of thing.
It sure was.
Right. It's in another area was Tribeca, which has also been completely transformed from what it was back then.
Yeah, yeah, like pretty much the whole city has been transformed. Maybe like the Bronx has been upgraded, but the Bronx is still kind of like the worst
Yeah,
part of New York City, to be honest, because there's a lot of crime there.
yeah.
But there was a lot, I think that's like the hookers were like really last working within the Bronx. I don't know if they still do it now. Like I think everything's like online now, escorting, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's online now. So and OnlyFans, you have that, so you can make money through that. So it's a very different time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I had read that that Jared guy, the subway guy, um how he got busted was that he had someone that would hook him up with an underage, I don't know if it was a girl or boy in New York City, but it was like that kind of thing where he would he would call in advance, and he got them maybe through the dark web or something like that.
Yeah. I'm waiting for someone to make that into a movie.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, Henenlotter could do a good job with that one. He could make a good Jared movie for sure. Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Well, our man Jeffrey, he's driving around, and he meets one of the ladies of the night. They're all kind of congregating in an area, and he tells her like, "Hey, I need more than one of you. I'm gonna have a party." And he starts flashing a big wad of cash, and she's like, "Okay, well, come on in. I'll I've got to introduce you to Zorro, right? Zorro is her pimp."
Yes,
And they take him through like into the bathroom where Zorro is there, and there's like people having sex in the stalls, people smoking crack all around him. They're like blowing the crack in his face. I mean, obviously, like he looks, completely out of place. He's wearing like a suit.
his glasses on.
His class exactly, yeah. And so they bring him in there, and that's when he talks to Zorro, and explains to Zorro that he needs some women, and in Zorro's, and then he gets like this kind of crazy, grinchy idea when he's seeing people smoke crack. He
Mhm.
says to Zorro, because Zorro's selling the crack at the same time that he's selling the women. He says to Zorro, "Hey, can I get some of that crack?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah, fine. Why not?" So his idea is to make a super crack to, I guess, get the
Yes.
women like either to kill them. I don't know if he's originally planning to kill them with the super crack, or if he just wants to really make them really high so that he can kill them himself.
No, I think his thought process was that these women are using crack anyway. They're probably gonna die from the crack. So I'm just gonna create this super crack to speed the process and make it easier on myself.
Yeah. And he tests it on a guinea pig, and
Oh, guinea
the
pig.
right, the poor guinea pig breathes in a little bit of it and is burst in four pieces.
It's like four fluffy pieces of fur.
Yeah. So,
He's just
and
like,
I mean,
oops, oops, okay, it worked.
exactly, yes. And I mean, the rocks are huge. He's got like
Those
the
are
bag of them.
ice.
It's just massive size rocks.
Yeah, it's like crystals, like diamonds. Like he went to get diamonds and Sierra Leone, like whatever. I don't know.
Right, exactly. Well, it looks like if you think of another Fantastic Four, that the 1994 one, it looks like the big diamond jewel that the jeweler steals.
Yes,
Right?
yes, that's probably what it was. Yeah.
It could be, yeah. He's just taking it from the same set. Um, so now it's time to put his plan into action. So because the other thing I forgot to mention is that there's a big storm coming, and he
Hmm.
can't make this work without a certain amount of electricity. And this big storm that's coming in 2 days will provide him with enough electricity to reanimate his girlfriend. So that's the
Right.
key. He's up against the clock here.
Yeah. Yeah, because he figured like it was like 140 volts. So he said it'll just
So,
black out the whole town.
right,
So it's gonna
right.
wait for the storm. I love the whole setup that he had that whole setup plan, the whole lightning rod. He had a roof on the shed that opened on its own.
Exactly.
It's just like
Yeah.
this guy was really decked out.
Exactly. He had it all ready to go. So he goes to the brothel area where Zorro has, the rooms where the women are. He's upstairs he's got like what, six or seven of
Yeah,
them. Um,
yeah,
and he's measuring them all out to determine which one is the one he wants. And so you can see the whole scene of them just sort of like, letting him measure their legs. He checks one's butt cheek off, he's going through the arms, all that kind of stuff. And he's realizing like, I don't know if one of them is perfect, right? Like they all have pieces that would be perfect. But he also kind of gets to know them in that process, right? Of
hmm
doing all of this. He's like, I can't kill any of them. I don't want to kill any of them. I can't choose to kill any of them. So the head woman, the head lady of the night who's there, she demands their money. Like, I want the money. I think was it Dolores? Was that her name?
I
Um,
think that was her name. Yeah,
yeah. She's like, we want our money, right? Because obviously she can't go back to Zorro empty-handed.
right, right. Yeah, that whole sequence is pretty funny. Like he just like these women just letting him measure their legs, and he's like magnifying glass to nipples.
Yes.
It's just like, and the girls are really nice to him. I give him that. They're not like being like mean to him at all. Like they're very like, obviously there's money involved, but it's also, I think they kind of like him because he's kind of like innocent to them anyway. So it's just like, yeah, that whole montage is very very cool, and not I don't think you could do that now in
No.
2024.
You're probably right because it's like very much like an 80s sex romp kind of scene. Like you
Yeah,
could
it's like
see,
Skinamax
yeah,
kind of montage. Yeah,
yeah. But you're right. It's like for them, it's like, well, there's a part of them wants to get it over with, right? Because they have to get back out in the street. Like Zorro is not going to let them hang out and party with him all night. So they want to get going on that part and him choosing a woman. But you're right. Like I think there's also a sense of like this is more fun than what we usually do. This is kind of out
Mhm.
of the ordinary.
Also, want to add that's the same building as the hotel in Basket Case.
Oh, it is. Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
That's awesome. So he's using the same set for that. That's right. That makes sense because I did kind of recognize it.
yeah.
That's awesome. And yeah, it's interesting too because when he throws the bag of money to Dolores, he wasn't thinking that inside that bag, or I think he didn't think that they would want this big bag of crack that he had. So they see it and they do what you do if you start smoking it.
He's like, no, don't do it, no.
Right.
Like, shut up and just smoke and having fun. Turning music on, he's like the devil's music. No, this is a bad combination.
Right. Right, because like they've pinned him to the bed
Yeah.
and they've gone through his bag and they're all smoking the crack while they've got him pinned down on the bed. And you're right, like he's saying things like, yeah, like this is, he's telling them that their lifestyle is lewd, and he's like almost like lecturing them at the same time he's trying to get them to stop smoking.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah.
I'm trying to kill you, women, but hey, what you're doing is wrong.
Right,
Okay, stop that.
exactly. Well, because he knows at this point it's only a matter of time because they've already
Right.
smoked it, and sure enough, like the first one blows up. And the way Henenlotter shoots these, it's like they'll be alive, and then he cuts the film to like a mannequin version of them that he blows up.
It's really cool looking, I gotta
Yeah,
say. Like you can like people might look at it and go, that's really cheap filmmaking, but I just look at it and go, that's really clever. No, the budget really worked in those scenes where the things explode.
yeah,
And it's just a cool effect. And I was like, this is really well filmmaking. This is really good.
yeah. And I think that's the thing, right? Is that like as long as the point gets across, right, that these are women that are blowing up, I think this is definitely more dangerous than if he just done CGI stuff.
Right. Right.
So there's that part of it. But you're right. Like when you get practical effects like that, and like you said, when you're creative on a budget to make it work the way he made it work, and of course it's funny too, right? Because it's like
Mhm.
it's dark humor, I guess is what I should say. That kind of thing,
And you can buy it in this universe that will happen.
right?
And he's trying to create a woman out of body parts. Like you complain about mannequins exploding. Like it's bizarre. It's supposed to be bizarre. That's the point.
Exactly. So now Zorro starts to get nervous because they're taking too long up there. So he goes upstairs, and we think, man, our guy's going to be in trouble because Zorro's going to come in and find all his women being blown up. But
Right.
luckily, the last one to get blown up, she's kind of like crawling away, trying to get away. Or I can't remember exactly. Or no, she's attacking him. She goes to attack him
Mhm.
because she knows it's over for her soon. Zorro breaks down the door, and when she blows up, her head hits him in the head, and knocks him out.
Such a great scene. That whole like it's like 5 minutes long.
Yes.
It's so good. And can we talk about Zorro for a second? This really buff Latino pimp with his
Yes.
great accent. I love his accent.
Yeah.
He's like a tough guy, and he gets knocked out by one giant head.
Yes. Yeah. With the mustache too, and
Yeah, porn
yeah.
stash. Yeah, like typical like late '80s porn star looking guy. Like
Yes.
probably kick your ass. And you look at him, well, yeah, he probably most likely maybe he does sell drugs and maybe he does pimp out women. He kind of has that vibe. Like it's very like business but sleazy at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And like even when he's pulling the bags of drugs out of his front pocket, he's like flexing as he does
Yeah,
it.
it's like very like I've done this so many times. Like here, check me
Yeah.
out.
Exactly. So our hero gathers up as many body parts as he can and puts them into some trash bags that he brought with him for the purpose. I didn't even consider that part of it that he would have brought trash bags with him, but he did, and he stuffs them in the back of his car and drives across the river back to Hocus, where he's from.
I love that he says, "I'm gonna fix Elizabeth first, and then I'll fix you ladies later." Like,
Right.
what's
Exactly.
he gonna do?
Right. Right, because that's in his head. He's thinking like, I'm gonna be able to put everybody back together, but it's like,
Right. With
but
different body parts. So you're taking their body parts for Elizabeth, and you go, what you do for them?
exactly, exactly. So that's kind of where we're at, where he's there in the he's in that shed, like the garage, and he's got like his welding
Hmm.
tools, and he's like welding body parts together, and at the same time he's got like, it's almost like he's got like containers of like legs and heads and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. And he's like sewing the neck onto the body.
Yeah.
And it's just like I like to know what was in that cooler because that goo, whatever was in there, was just amazing.
Right, because they don't really explain it. It's just some sort of
No,
goo
it
that
just makes fake
preserves her.
body parts. Like what chemical is that? Like
Right, exactly. 'Cause, yeah, for people who haven't seen it before, I mean, and you definitely should see this. I mean, it's a little bit lighter than like, say, like grape soda.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
like a neon purplish, like dry ice coming out of it.
yeah,
It's very interesting.
yeah, and so, there must be some kind of mechanism that they wired into the freezer to make it bubble, because it's bubbling the
It,
whole time.
it reminded me of Ghostbusters 2, the pink ooze.
Oh yes,
It's just purple.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right. Because didn't they sell toy versions of that when Ghostbusters 2 came out?
They did, yeah. Like back in the day, you could buy ooze like really easily.
Right.
Especially when Ninja Turtles came out, also you could buy ooze.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And then He-Man had the slime pit that
Flying
had,
Pit, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Yeah. It was everywhere at that time.
That's like what the stuff was like the stuff like that kind of had that vibe, the trope.
Oh,
It was kind of,
yes.
was based on like the marshmallow like goo, that gel kind of thing.
Yeah,
If you could
exactly.
eat this, you could eat this. If you can't eat like regular gel, that would just kill you.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, stuff like that back then. It was like, because that was I think nowadays they make that stuff edible because they know kids are
Yeah.
just going to eat it anyway.
It was a wild, wild west back then, you know.
Yeah,
We lived dangerously. Like you kids did not understand.
no, no. I
We
mean,
were, we were, we were at war with everything.
right, yeah, I mean,
We
with
should have-
so many toys were toxic back then, and that was just kind of
Yes.
how it was.
I couldn't tell you how many toys I chewed on as a kid. Like who knows what was in those toys.
Right, exactly, exactly. Yeah, and just like, I remember Mad Balls. I remember,
Oh,
because
yeah.
if you played, something with like kick, whatever. I remember one time that somebody, I think it was my dad actually. I may even playing. I don't remember, but the ball hit me in the face, but the nose caught me in the eye. I had like this bloodshot eye for like a week
Ooh,
because of the
wow.
nose on the Mad Ball.
Wow.
It was like,
Great aim.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, those toys were true. But it's funny because, like, yeah, I don't know about you, but it's like anytime I see pictures of them online or something like that, I get like this tinge of like, I want to buy them all.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah,
Because it's
it's
just it was just so cool back then. Like you could just now, I think everybody's so spoiled now.
yeah. Well, yeah,
Like
because
you have,
that was
I
the
think you have to
thing.
earn like those toys. You have to find them and buy
Yeah.
them. Make sure they're in good condition. Because if you buy them, they weren't cheap.
Yeah, because that's right. Because it wasn't, I think that I didn't even think about that. You're right. Because we take for granted that you can go on Amazon,
Right.
and find,
Yeah.
yeah, or even like, I mean, this is kind of a crazy thing. Like, you can go on like the Best Buy site or like Target or something and
Mhm.
find what store has the item that you're looking for. So you don't even have to go to, you remember you would have to go to like multiple stores to find something. Now you don't even have to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's convenient, it's great, but at the same time, I kind of miss that like adventure, the hunting for those things. Like video stores, same thing. Like now everything's at the tip of your fingers and your hand. Go on Netflix, go on Hulu, Amazon, whatever. You'll find a movie. Back then, you couldn't even do that. You had to go to a video store, look at the covers, see what the movie's about. Ask the clerk, "Hey, is the movie any good?" They say yes or no. You rent it out. It's no longer fun. It's
No.
just like you can get everything so easily now. Like you were talking about earlier, the DoorDash, the Grubhub, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Just order it. You know.
Yeah, well, because that's one of the interesting things, like Instacart, for example, like that was supposed to be, because it's funny, like, you watch like episodes of like All in the Family,
Hmm.
where like, they'll have the grocer will deliver the groceries to
Yeah.
and that was like a common thing in New York City, that you have your groceries delivered, and Instacart was like trying to like make like their own like kind of version of that for like all of New York City that they kind of expanded everywhere. But then it
Yeah.
was just like everybody else is like, well, that's that's not that novel concept. We could do that ourselves, and so now I think they're getting priced out, and like even like you said, like DoorDash, it's like, well, we
Yeah.
could do that. We could have our drivers do grocery shopping, or we could even work with the grocery store and have them do the grocery
Like
shopping.
the,
And
it's like the
us,
Whole Foods with Amazon.
yeah, that's a good, yeah. They bought out Whole Foods and we're like, hey, we'll deliver the groceries to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing, and it's like, I remember as a kid, like if if I go to Toys R Us, it was like a big deal, like and
Mhm.
it's funny, like I remember going with my mom and my nephew, like I don't know, it's been like 15 years ago now. That was been like oh 06, oh 07. So this is like or oh 09 maybe. So it's even 15 years ago now. But it was like I didn't have that same feeling like Toys R Us. I was like trying to bring myself back to when I was his age going into Toys R Us, but I couldn't quite get the same vibe of it. That was like just like imagining myself being that small, just seeing like a whole tall stack of like Ninja Turtles or He-Man figures.
Yeah, I think at that point technology had really just passed us by at that point. Yeah, internet, you don't need to go to the store for that stuff. You'll give information so easily at that point.
Yeah,
So it's like, the adventure, the kind of search for knowledge at that point was already like you already knew everything at that point.
yeah.
So going there's like, okay, well, I'm getting this toy, but like I already know what I'm getting.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, even myself, like I think about like if I want to get a bobblehead at a minor league game or professional game or whatever, baseball game, and I miss it, I get there too late, the train's late or something, and I miss it. It's like, well, if I really want the bobblehead, I can just pony up $30 and get it on eBay because there's somebody who collected them all at the game who's selling them on eBay, and so it's like even that kind of stuff, like you can go on eBay and find it.
Right. Or the website itself will sell it like after the
Yeah,
fact. Like, here, it was highly demanded. Here you go.
right, right,
You can just pay the
exactly.
shipping plus whatever you had to pay for it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's a it that's kind of it's when you watch a movie like this, it kind of brings back like a little bit of that kind of stuff where you're like, okay, you can't just buy a bag of, or because you can't just have DoorDash deliver you a bag of
mhm.
coleslaw, that you just, or like you said, even like a fully made coleslaw, right? At the grocery store, you've got to actually take a head of cabbage and dice it up to make your coleslaw
Yeah.
with. It's kind of the same thing with a lot of this, these movies kind of bring you back to that period.
I think that's why I have like sometimes I have trouble watching like modern horror movies because I feel like everything now is easier to like manage.
Yeah.
You have cell phones, you have internet, you have all these like options that makes it easier for you like to go against your killer. Like back in the 80s, you didn't have those options. You want to call somebody for help, you gotta go to a payphone and call them. It's so weird like how fast everything changed because like I it's because I still like feel like I live still back in like in the 80s, 90s. And now I look at people like kids on their cell phones. I'm like, is this still like my world? You know what I
Right.
mean? Like feel like out of place at times. Like I mean, I'm glad that these things happen, but at the same time, like it's not as fun as it was.
Right. Yeah. It was funny. I was reviewing a Fred Williamson movie called, I think it was called Double Impact. He did it with Bo Svensson, and there's a scene where the bad guys are using a payphone outside of a McDonald's, and then
Oh,
they just
wow.
go in the McDonald's. And I was remembering, remember there's times where it's like, you get to use a payphone wherever you can use it, and so it's like, oh,
Mhm.
well, the McDonald's payphone's right there, and it's like you're on the payphone and you start smelling the French fries, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I go in there and get something to eat, and it's like McDonald's doesn't have that kind of advertising anymore, right? Because it's like,
Yeah.
if there's a payphone outside of McDonald's, it's been ripped apart and it's graffitied and all that kind of stuff.
It's it always feels like culture shock. It just feels like a different place.
Yeah,
Like
for sure.
I feel like after like pretty much like 9/11, things started to really change into that mindset.
Yeah, because it is interesting because it's like the '90s were this period. It feels like, especially here in the United States, of just like constant, like I don't like it was like growth and like coming together and like kind of fun stuff. Yeah, like, I know what you mean. It was like it's like the '90s ended, I think, with 9/11. It almost feels like where
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
it just yeah,
And I feel like it changed then and then it changed again in 2000 with COVID.
yeah.
So now we're in a whole different sphere of like technology and the way people socialize. And now it's I don't know if it's for better or worse. And stuff like social media has changed things. Like tribalism now on social media, and I think it just pretty much like exposed a lot of things that the earlier days were trying to hide, and now everything's just come to light. And I think that's really what is really different from 1990 to now. Like it's just everything's out in the open now.
Yeah,
And
and it's easier. Like you think it's like I live in Philadelphia and you live in New York, where it's like part of what makes the city great is that you come together with so many people, and
Mhm.
you ride the subway with so many people, you're
Right.
in the store with so many, and you kind of are there and you can come together with them. But now with cell phones, you don't have to necessarily come together with other people. You can sit there, you can sit next to people of all backgrounds on a subway and ignore them completely. Um,
That's New York City.
yeah, yeah. I remember there was the footage in New York City of the guy with the Apple thing, the VR thing or something like that, where he had
Oh,
like the
yeah.
yeah, and he's just like, which I would I don't for me when I ride the subways here in Philly at least, I try to make sure if I'm doing anything, I'm reading a book because I'm just so afraid that like if I'm not paying attention to my surroundings enough, just
Hmm.
being alert. It's like if I've got like my grocery bag sitting next to me at my feet, I want to make sure nobody can like grab that grocery bag on their way out to, at one of the stops or something. So I would be definitely afraid of doing something like that.
It's strange. I saw someone the other day like walking in the street doing that, and I'm like this is like I can't wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
It's I feel like I feel like I should have been born earlier than I was.
Right.
Sometimes.
Well, because yeah, what's interesting about our time, and I think one of the things I've noticed, like when I listen to podcasts where people that are slightly younger than us are on with people that are either our age or a little bit older, is that we were in this sort of cusp period where a lot of things that were kind of the way things were in the 70s, 60s and 70s were still kind of that way.
Right.
Um, like for example, cable TV, it was a thing in the 80s, but it
Hmm.
hadn't completely replaced what we knew of as TV at that time. So like you could still watch like, 50s and 60s horror movies on a weekend on
Right.
broadcast TV,
Right.
or like, things like that, like that like eventually like in the 90s it was like TNT and TBS or whatever. They kind of just took things over and suddenly it was like the only thing you could see on a weekend was Shawshank Redemption or something like that.
Yeah, syndication was huge
Right.
back then. Yeah, I think like 10 years ago, that's when like syndication just went out the window, and now everything's just Netflix. Pretty much destroyed all that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like if you like, you think of those cable channels when they first came out. I mean, USA with USA Up All Night. It was like,
Yeah,
the
night.
stuff that they would show on a Friday and Saturday night was like it was fun. It was like,
Monster
sleepover
Vision.
time and stuff like that.
Yeah, Monster Vision,
Yeah.
stuff like that. Yeah.
That's right.
Um,
Monster Vision. Yeah, that was another great one. Yeah. I mean, you would never expect TNT to show anything like that. But
right.
now, they would never do a Monster Vision.
Even MTV, like the
Yeah.
videos.
Yeah.
Now YouTube for that.
Right. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
just it's
The other thing that was great about MTV in the 80s into the early 90s was that it had a more of a New York feel to it too.
mhm, sure did, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they would use like like people that did public access stuff in New York that would get big and they would be on those kinds of things that like I think eventually like when they became I think once they hit like the TRL phase they were kind of fully immersed in like the new Times Square. You would see the new Times Square from the show,
Mhm.
but now they're kind of like you said like you don't the fact that they call themselves music television is weird now.
It's the branding thing. I think it's branding
Right.
now.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's a crazy thing. Well, yeah. Well, why don't we just we'll take a break here, and then what we'll do when we come back because we're getting close to the actual hook Frankenhooker getting into the film. So
Wow.
we'll
It's even
take
the
a
same
break.
movie, yes.
Exactly, exactly. So we'll take a break here, and then we come back. But we'll wrap up Frankenhooker. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former Special Forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and yeah, we are at the stage here where the thunderstorm is rolling through Hohokus, New Jersey. He looks like our hero Jeffrey Franken has put together the body as well as he's going to put it together. So now what he has to do, and this is what you alluded to earlier, he has to get the body up in the sky high enough to get the electricity to hit it. And like you said, he's got like this whole like 50s or 60s kind of device thing, right? It's like it's this big spire with like thing, like globes and things like that around it.
It's pretty much the same setup as the original Frankenstein.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
he watched the movie, went, oh, this is how this works. Okay, we put her on this stretcher.
yeah.
Let's get this like spiral metal rod. Let's lift her up. Let's have a shed that opens on the roof. I don't know how he managed that. And let's raise her up towards the sky, and then let this. Hopefully, this lightning will hit it. And it's bizarre, but that's the movie for you. You know, that's the whole point.
And it not only does the electricity, does the lightning hit her when it's up in the sky like that, but it comes into the shed and it
Yes.
hits Frankie, but it also hits the freezer because one of the
Hmm.
things I forgot to mention is before he lifts the body up in the sky, he decides he's going to do a little cleaning, and he throws all the body parts into that big tub or that big freezer thing. Um,
Yeah.
so once the electricity starts coming, it hits that thing. So we know something's going to happen with that a little bit later.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an eyesight. I know. Like, oh,
Right.
okay, cool.
Exactly. Well, I'll save these body parts. I could use them at some point. So, after he gets hit by lightning, he brings the body back down. You know, lifts up the sheet that's on it and all that stuff. And sure enough, Beth or Elizabeth is alive, but she's a little off. Like she's twitching, but she's also just essentially just quoting things that the prostitutes were saying in the previous scenes.
Also, she went from blonde to brunette.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's supposed to be purple hair, right? And he didn't.
Oh yeah, kind of. Yeah, it was kind of like dark. Yeah, like dark purple. Like I guess it's from like the goo, whatever was doing to her.
Right. Because
Yeah.
I think he said that for if it was for her or somebody else that he was trying to maybe it was like one of the doubles or something. He was trying to he also wanted the pubic hair to be purple,
Yes.
and
Yes.
they tried
Yeah.
dyeing it and they had trouble with it. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think it didn't quite have go. I don't know if maybe there wasn't Manic Panic. There must have been Manic Panic in the night. I think it's an older company. But he maybe he wasn't too keen on doing the Manic Panic route.
Right. Right. Yeah. But yeah, she's pretty much fully formed. Yeah, like you said, she has facial tics. She's talking like all the hookers that he took the body parts from. Same
Right.
dialogue, same accent, same the way it's the performance is great by Patty
Yeah.
Mullen in this movie.
Yeah.
Like she just really embodies all the women that she's made of now.
Yeah, yeah, and the accent because originally Patty Mullen originally is from Staten Island, and
Wow.
so she's really doing like that North Jersey, that
Mhm.
accent. And I know my wife and I watch Real Housewives of New Jersey. They actually have someone from Staten Island on that show. Yeah, so it's kind of funny how he's kind of really doing the accent, but yeah, he's kind of like, oh, honey, it's you, and then when he realized, it's like when she's like saying like, do you got any money, or she's like asking him money for, he's like, oh no, what happened, what did I do, and she throws him aside and leaves and just takes a walk.
Well, you be careful what you wish for, right?
Right.
You want to create the ultimate hooker. Oh, there you go.
Right, exactly. And so then, she hops on a train. So I guess if she's in Hoboken, I don't know if she takes the PATH train
Yeah.
yeah, but she ends up at Times Square, which is where she's, the
We
other
get Can we talk about that one kid on the train looking at her?
with the Led Zeppelin shirt.
Yeah, I feel like he premature ejaculated on himself because it
Yeah,
was like, oh,
right, right,
oh my
exactly.
God.
Yeah, because it's funny how but there's like a combination of reactions to her on the subway. Like some people are freaked out and they're like, "Oh boy, let me get away." Other people are kind of like, "This is regular day in New York City
Yeah,
here in
yeah,
1990. This is no. I've seen worse."
right. That would be me. I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah,
Do
I know
your
here.
thing.
I was gonna say here in Philly, I've gotten really good at just taking my book and just sort of looking down at my book and just sort of letting whatever happens around me happen.
I'm a believer in be yourself and
Yeah,
living your truth. So if that's what she wants to do, then
yeah,
it's all good. As long as she's
yeah.
not hurting nobody or herself, it's all good.
Exactly, which she isn't unless anybody gets in her way, and then she just throws them aside
Right,
very
right.
quickly. Which it's kind of a funny combination where because she's walking like Frankenstein, like she's got like the big. It's funny, she's got like platform heels that kind
Hmm.
of mimic the big Frankenstein boots,
Yeah.
and she's walking and she gets off out the subway at Times Square, and she is propositioned by a Swedish guy who I think was he in Basket Case or Brain Damage.
I
This
think he was in Brain Damage.
okay, the Swedish guy, yeah.
So, yeah.
And of
Uh,
course he's actually Norwegian in real life. I read in the trivia. They just made fun of him being Swedish, or they made a joke about it him being
yeah,
Swedish.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and so she's kind of wandering around, throwing guys around who are coming up to her. She's
The Asian trio that show up,
exactly that's right. That's right. Because
taking pictures of her, and she's just like twitching.
right, because that's right. You couldn't do a comedy like this in like the late 80s, early 90s without the Japanese tourists getting their
Yes.
pictures.
Yes, like there's the Japanese businessman just taking pictures of this really awkward looking woman
Right,
who has
exactly.
like two left legs because I'm not sure like why she's walking like that, but
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, and it is. I mean, it is Times Square, and it's funny because I think Frank Henenlotter said like when he made it, it fit with Times Square.
yeah,
And now it's like if you're a younger person who didn't know that what Times Square was before, if you only know the Bubba Gump Shrimp Times Square, um, a lot of these jokes or a lot of these kind of things wouldn't make as much sense.
right, right, yeah. It's like Jason Takes Manhattan when he's in Manhattan. It's the same Times Square. That's that vibe.
Yeah,
Where
yeah.
like it's like the scum of the earth is like just hanging around.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's funny because I don't know if you ever watched that No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain when
Hmm.
he did Disappearing Manhattan. That was one of the episodes he did,
Yeah.
and he was doing kind of the old restaurant stuff like that. But he goes on this big diatribe about Times Square, and he's like, "Oh, can you imagine being the waitress working at that Bubba Gump shrimp place when it's like the 30th time someone says run Forrest run to you and you're ready to go up back and shoot yourself or something like that." I can't remember what he said, but it's like yeah, but it kind of summed it up.
Yeah. He just ranting and venting about, hey, what did you do
Yeah.
to my New York?
Right, right, exactly. And it's funny, I kind of forgot about too. There was a joke about because a lot of they kept calling him Jersey Boy. I kept forgetting about that.
Jersey
Uh,
boy, yeah.
yeah, Jeffrey Freddie, they called him Jersey Boy all the time. And he when he's first talking to the hookers, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just from over the bridge there." And I remember Bourdain talking about sort of like in the New York restaurant parlance, the what they call the bridge tunnel crowd.
Mhm.
And so he's kind of representing the bridge tunnel crowd to the hookers.
Yeah. It's very cool what he like he put in his script. It's like it feels like very New York, New Jersey movie.
Yeah.
When people actually talk like that, people, behave like that. That's why I love these movies. I feel like he really embodies the city
Yeah,
in a
yeah,
way that a lot of directors don't.
there's an authenticity with how he does it. Like you said, yeah, he
Yeah.
when it comes to using New York as a character in the movies, he does it in a way like you said that other directors don't.
Like I feel like Scorsese does it well. He does it well. Maybe Coppola used to do it well.
Yeah,
Freakin used to do it well. Those people, those directors that really knew New York as New York.
yeah, Spike Lee would
Like
yeah.
yes, Spike is a great example. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. It's like it's like when the nine. It's almost like when Giuliani was doing the whole cleanup thing on
Hmm.
Times Square and all that stuff. It's almost
Yeah.
like that's when the use of New York changed, and that's when you start getting like the You Got Mails and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It cleaned up, became more like a brand,
Yeah,
corporation in a way. It was very like business instead of like this is our city, it was their city now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I went and saw a Brooklyn Nets game. It was my first time, in Brooklyn, and it is like it's you get off the subway there, near where the arena is.
Barclays. Yeah,
Yeah,
Barclays.
the Barclays, exactly. Yeah, and it's a different feel. Or Queens, going to see baseball games in Queens. It's like it's a very different feel from when you're in Manhattan. I mean, Manhattan
Yeah.
feels big, and especially someone like me from Maine, where Philly's. Obviously, I've been in Philadelphia for a while, but even compared to Philadelphia, Manhattan is just like it gets you. But like, there's almost like a more, I don't know if character is the right word, or there's just like a maybe more authentic. Maybe that's the term when you're in the other boroughs.
It's funny now because if you live here, like I feel like Manhattan is not like it's not really the cool place anymore. I feel like Brooklyn is now. 'Cause I think everything shifted over to Brooklyn
Yeah,
because everybody started buying property over there. The hipsters
right,
live there. It's like you go to Brooklyn, it's like this is what Manhattan used to be. You have
right.
graffiti, everybody's hanging outside, doing whatever. And it's just like it's a vibe.
Yeah,
And Manhattan is very like businessmen just walking around. Everybody's just trying to get to the next point of destination. And Brooklyn's more chill. It's like, you could just hang out. And I feel like that's really the difference now. I feel like if people make films in Brooklyn, it'll probably look more like Frankenhooker than um, You Got Mail
yeah.
in a way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like right now, I'm hearing kids screaming outside of my door here because that's kind of what South Philly is. Is that it's like once the weather is good enough, everybody's outside.
Yeah.
Everybody's hanging out, and yeah,
Yeah.
they kind of take that.
You could be out at 1 a.m. and there's like a whole bunch of people, big crowd outside.
Yeah,
No one's going to sleep. No one's going to work. No one
right.
cares.
Yeah, yeah. That's one interesting thing about Philadelphia that I noticed is that it's a lot safer going out at night in the summer than it is in the winter. Because in the winter, everybody's inside, so it's like if people are out,
Yeah.
there's a better chance of running into somebody that could cause you harm. Whereas in the summer, it's like you said, like families will be out at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, just kind of, just getting out and, relaxing.
I think that's everywhere. Just the weather is like everybody's gonna be out. The heat makes you more energetic in a way.
Yeah.
And then if you're cold, you're gonna be more concerned about being warm than, attacking somebody. You know what I mean?
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, but it's more desolate, in here,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the winter. It's like I went to a hockey game, and then I had to run up to 7-Eleven when I got back, so it was like 10:30 at night, and it was like one of those things where like I'm in there, and my wife was like, I don't know if it's gonna be safe to go up there. I'm like, I'll just go quick and I'll get a few things and come back. And I'm in there and I start hearing this guy comes in and he just starts like swearing and slamming stuff around. And I was checking out and I kind of felt bad for the guy behind the counter because I was like, I'm getting out of here. I'm like, I'm gonna deal with this for this longer. But I mean, I guess that kind of thing happens in the summer too. But yeah, it's just like, yeah, it feels like in the summer there's more people out. So it's like,
Yeah.
if someone's gonna do harm or something like that, there's more people to see it and witness it. That it's like, it's, I don't know, it kind of feels safer when there's more
Yeah.
people around.
There's more people to protect you in case something happens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so, yeah, you're right. Like it's one of the things I think, one of the things about where I live here in South Philly, and you probably, like you say in like Brooklyn compared to like Manhattan, is like everybody knows each other too. So it's like,
Hmm.
one day I came outside and my neighbor across the street had a package and he was like, yeah, I saw these two girls that were like going to steal it. And he told them that we had a ring camera, which we don't have. But he was like, yeah, that ring camera caught you guys and all this stuff. But like, but it's like the fact that you have that, that someone would, catch something like that. It's like, oh, I don't, don't worry about like people stealing, or like if they drop it off in the wrong place, they just bring it over to you, and same thing for me. If there's somebody drops something off the wrong place here, I bring it over to them. It's a kind of a vibe where I think you're right, like Manhattan, because everybody's kind of moving. And I think like center city of Philadelphia is starting to get like that. And a lot of people there, you see signs up everywhere that say keep New York out of Philly. Because I think that's what it is that people that can't afford Manhattan are moving to
Hmm.
Philly because you can work remotely now and just take the train up a couple times a week.
Yeah, the pandemic changed a lot of things. Like,
Yeah.
like New York now is very more dangerous than it was before.
Yeah.
It's
Same
like
with Philly.
I think more people are like desperate now.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad in a way. Like I feel like, I go to like the city all the time. I'm just like it's not the same
Yeah.
as it was before 2020.
Yeah, it does have that feel of like, because in Philly, I think in particular, what happened was a combination of like the social services that were available closed during the pandemic, and then they just
Mhm.
didn't get the money to reopen.
Yeah.
So less of a safety net, but then also, at least here in Philly, a lot of like chains closed, and
Yes.
those were like a lot of lower income jobs, but they're jobs that like a lot of younger people would do to like help support their families. Like, okay, working at Target a few times a week to help support my family. And then it's like, well, Target closes 3 locations and they're paying $15 an hour, so they're gonna take a kid to work there. They're gonna pick people that have more experience and stuff like that. And I think with that kind of thing, it made more younger people have to turn to like drugs and just selling drugs and things like that, which led to more violence because there's not as many opportunities for there either. And so I think that's part of it, is that like, yeah, a lot of jobs kind of dried up here, at least here in Philly, because the foot traffic wasn't there to support them. And so that's where a lot of the issues came in.
I think it's that plus people realize, hey, I could work from home and still make the same money. I could take care of my family.
Yeah.
I don't have to go out and do this, and that's another way why a lot of people quit their jobs, and then that caused businesses to close. And it's just like, I think it reveals a lot about the class system, and it just screwed everything up.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing. It's a shame, because it is. It's like you said, like when you think of like kind of pre-pandemic, when you had sort of like that kind of, I mean, things are starting, at least in Philadelphia, they're starting to kind of get back. That you're starting. One of the things I think that has been good about Philadelphia is that they're starting to see more like small businesses open where the chains closed, which I think
Okay.
is good. But it still has a long ways to go, I think, to kind of get back to where it was. And again, like I think that's the concern, is that like you know people from New York City who don't want to pay for Manhattan, they'll move to Philadelphia, and yeah, and you go again, you can take the Amtrak twice a week to New York if you've got to be in the office twice a week, and the rest of the time you can stay living here and pay like I don't even think it's half the rent. It might be a third of the rent of what you had to pay in Manhattan.
Pretty much, yeah. Philly's pretty much a lot cheaper than it is.
Yeah.
And I think the tax is also not that high either.
Right.
So,
Yeah, yeah. Because there is a city tax that you pay in addition to the federal tax, but it's not the same. I mean, imagine there's probably a city tax in New York City as well, so it's probably a wash there.
yeah,
Yeah,
it opened a lot of people's eyes to
yeah.
what's going on, and I don't know when it's gonna fix itself up, but I guess it's slowly getting there, but I think it's not quick enough for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think between inflation and just I mean, a
Yeah.
lot of things are more expensive. I mean, sports is well,
Hmm.
I mean, the Brooklyn Nets are cheaper, because the team's not as good. But if you want to go see a Knicks game, it's like $100 for the cheap
Yeah.
seats, which is
Concerts, even the streaming services, everything's raising their prices.
yeah.
That was the comfort food during the pandemic. Now you have to pay extra for this now. It's the same as cable.
Right. Yeah, yeah, and what we're finding, right, with the streaming services, is that they're all double dipping, right? Where it's like,
Mhm.
Disney's saying like, okay, well, you can pay for Disney Plus and ESPN Plus and Hulu,
Wow.
but then you got to pay cable to get us, cable's got to pay us to be able to have their channels on cable, and cable's like, well, no, we're not going to pay you for ESPN anymore because people are getting it on their phones. And so then they're like, well, okay, well, what are we going to do now, because we need the money from cable to be able to fund everything. And
Right.
so now they're realizing, oh, maybe we need to pull things out, or it's like, yeah. And I mean, I think back in like the late 2000s, everything was on Netflix. Even like
Mhm.
stars in those companies use Netflix as their streaming service, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were just like, they all saw Netflix's money, and they all thought, well, I can do this. We can make our own money there. And so, um, yeah. And of course, this movie. I mean, this is on AMC Plus, so it's on included with Shutter, but it's also on Tubi, the free one. And I only remember a few commercials when I was watching it.
I watched this on Peacock.
Mm. So
So
Peacock has it as well. Yeah,
yeah, it's
yeah. So
everywhere.
yeah. Well, that's the thing with Peacock, right? So we get Peacock because it's included with our cable.
Oh, okay. You have
So we get
Comcast.
Yeah, so we have Comcast, and we pay so much for Comcast every month. We pay way more than we probably should. Because of that, they threw in the premium Peacock instead with it. And so, like, I was visiting my family in New England. My dad wanted to watch the Chiefs game that was on. I
Oh,
can't remember who the Chiefs were playing, but that was that game that was only on.
that was the wild card game, right?
That's right. Yeah, and it was only on Peacock, and so it was a pain to have to sign in up there because I'm used to just I signed in once and I don't do it ever again. So it was a pain, but it was like, yeah, it was like one of those things. And I know like WrestleMania was on Peacock.
Hmm.
Yeah, so Yeah, they're all kind of finding their niche for like what they offer that you can only get there.
Yes, it get to a point where you're gonna start have to drop certain services. Like,
Yeah.
if Netflix is getting like stuff from Max, like why do I have
Right.
Max?
Right, exactly. Right, because Max was losing money.
Right.
Yeah, they were losing money, so they've started. You notice, yeah, if you notice, like Netflix has DC
DC
movies,
stuff.
and
Yeah.
Tubi has it as well. Tubi has like Black Adam in those movies.
And now they're making money because all these movies they're bringing out are making the money.
Right.
The number one studio right now is with Godzilla and Dune and
Yeah.
all that stuff's coming up. It's like, yeah. And
Yeah.
this is the one that's screwed at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think they're banking on Deadpool versus Deadpool and Wolverine to be the one that saves everyone. Which
That's gonna make money.
yeah,
But yeah, after that, like, what do you do? I
yeah,
feel like X-Men right now is saving them,
yeah.
but you gotta, I don't know. It's like Apple TV is having a trouble now, and they try to merge everything with Paramount. It's like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
it's boggling,
Well,
mind-boggling.
because like when you talk about the X-Men, Disney for years, right, when they bought Marvel in the early 2010s, for years they were diminishing the X-Men because
Hmm.
they didn't want Fox to have any publicity.
Yeah,
So it was
they
like,
don't. Yeah,
yeah, they did, and now it's like they need the X-Men because I think the Avengers had a cap, like them, when we were growing up, the X-Men were it. It was
yeah.
like
Yeah.
they had like 5 books, I think, at that time, in the early 90s before.
I think generous five.
Yeah,
Not a lot
right.
more than that, I think.
Yeah, well, because they had the Uncanny X-Men, they had the regular X-Men, they had
X Factor,
X-Force, Wolverine had his own book.
X
Um,
Factor.
yeah,
Deadpool just eventually had a book.
Deadpool
He's
eventually, right? And Cable, or I think,
able.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's yeah. In the 2000s, it was like that's right. It kept moving in that direction where they just
Excalibur.
Excalibur. That's right. I forgot about Excalibur. That's right. That was another X book. Yeah, X Factor. That's right. You mentioned X Factor. Yeah, yeah. It's amazing. Like how much. Yeah, I mean they ruled everything, and then it was like, well, Disney's like, well, we don't want Fox to make any money off this, so we're gonna kind of that's when they started like making the books different, like the X-Men suddenly lost their powers and all that kind of stuff.
Just took over. It was like, then when the humans bombed, they're like, okay, let's bring back the X.
Right, exactly. So, and now they need them again. Now they need the X-Men again. And yeah, it is kind of interesting how that kind of comes full circle. But it's like, at the time I used to give Fox a hard time for not making more money off the X-Men. I think Deadpool was the one they always should have made money off of, because no matter what Disney would do to diminish the X-Men, Deadpool was always one of their most popular products.
Yeah, I think that was the most successful thing they had, really, besides maybe Logan
Well,
at
yeah,
that point.
Logan critically was successful, but yeah, those two Deadpools were the most.
Yeah,
I don't know which one of the two was the more successful, but they were the most successful for
I
sure.
say probably the second one was probably a little bit more. I think the first one was better, but I think the second one did more money.
That's right. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the first one I read that they wanted Wolverine in the first one,
Mm.
and Fox said no, you can't have him because they didn't want to pay for his salary to be in the movie. Um, Imagine if they had put him in. I mean, do you think? I mean, if it was 10 million, if it cost them 10 million, I don't know what it cost, what Hugh Jackman's salary would have been to be in that movie, but let's say it was 10 million. I don't think it would have been that much, but if they invested 10 million more, I think they would have probably made another 200 or 300 million off that movie just by having Wolverine in it and having, more people would have wanted to see it in the theater because of that.
Probably, yeah. But I feel like they realize that Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool, so he's gonna make money. He has a fan base. People love to see him.
Yeah.
So I think they just realized like this time, like, to do the Disney one now, to really like bring back the MCU, they have to bring in Wolverine at this
Yeah.
point. Like, we have to save this
Yeah.
from falling
Exactly.
apart. And I
Yeah.
think once we get through this whole Avengers Secret War stuff, I think Fantastic Four and X-Men is just gonna save the whole universe at this point. I think that's what the
Yeah.
people are waiting for.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's what we're going to see, and I think the X-Men. It's amazing that they were able to make it as successful as they did without the X-Men. I think that they
Yeah.
made people like Iron Man and Thor like so huge. I don't know about you. I mean, Thor was the one like but I don't know about you, but growing up, it's like you watch like Adventures of Babysitting, and the joke is that
Oh,
the girl
yeah.
is a fan of Thor.
Thor, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Thor was my guy, and Captain America was my guy. Everybody else was kind of like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
Captain America. Yeah, Thor. I remember because I was joking with somebody that like I'd go to a garage sale or something and I'd see Thor comics and I would just be like be like, oh, I don't want Thor. I'm not, and now it's like he's so huge, and so
Mhm.
yeah, I never really considered that, that like, yeah, but when you do it right with like a good actor, and even with Thor, like the stories aren't always the best. It's just like they're fun. Um,
Right.
that if you make it fun, it can work. But yeah, I always thought he had kind of a more of a, I don't know, more, I don't say niche fandom, but I know for me, I was a huge fan of Silver Surfer, who also wasn't as
Yeah.
like, yeah. So that was my Silver Surfer and Daredevil. Those were my two, which those were not big ones either. Like I wouldn't have expected, either of those to make hundreds of millions of dollars. But Thor, I mean, that's a franchise that's like, that has made a good amount of money for them, off a character who I think, outside of being in the Avengers, I think by himself, he was, his comic books didn't sell quite as much.
Yeah, and then you made a pop culture icon in Loki.
Right?
So
Yes.
you got something out of it.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
Loki honestly is probably bigger than Thor at this point.
yes. Yeah. I mean, how many times do you go on Instagram or something and somebody's posting their pet and their pet's name is Loki?
Yeah, it's amazing what they did with that whole franchise. Before pretty much Endgame, I think was pretty much the peak.
Yeah.
Um, but it's amazing what they did with those characters. I think that's just
Yeah.
good business.
Yeah.
And now they gotta realize like, we have these characters that we've bought and we need them. I mean, you can't just do Spider-Man movies and keep bringing these older actors in. You gotta do new stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
Maybe.
and it's like, they picked like the perfect actors early on in the process, right? I mean, like, Robert Downey Jr. was perfect for Iron Man. Chadwick Boseman was perfect for Black Panther when they were kind of, they're kind of in that point where like they kept getting higher and it was like, okay, well, what's going to happen with Black Panther? And they really had to hit it out of the park to make it,
Mhm.
and they do, like it's like, one of the best of those movies, I think. Or like, Captain America Winter Soldier, somebody was saying how
Right.
that's hit its 10-year mark recently, and it's like,
Top
it,
two for me.
yeah, yeah, it's like it works, it's like but it's like, they had to keep doing. I was saying to some, I don't know if it was on my podcast or somewhere, where it's, it's rare that you get a franchise like that, where, I mean, maybe the one dud you could say was the Incredible Hulk, the second movie in the MCU, but they really didn't have any duds, and then they had some like really spectacular ones that made them a lot of money.
Yeah. I like that Hulk movie though. I think that
Yeah.
movie's actually I don't think it's that bad, honestly.
I liked it. I liked it, but it is funny. Like whenever you see like when, when the Marvels came out this past fall, which I enjoyed that one too.
Hmm.
But it was like, oh, it was the first one since, the Incredible Hulk to not do this or that. It seems like that was the one that, like, everything like Ant-Man, the first one since the Incredible Hulk to not do this on the opening weekend or something like that. It's like, I don't know if it was because it was Edward Norton, if people didn't appreciate it, but I agree with you. I think on a second viewing, it for people, it's not a bad movie. I think it's just, from a money standpoint, I guess, I don't know, if it's considered one that didn't do as well for them.
And plus it was early on too, they were still figuring it out.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
now it's a little more like, okay, we had this formula now. I think we ran it into the ground and it's just not working.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Marvels, watching that movie, I mean, it was a good movie.
Yeah.
And kind of, thinking about the movie we're talking about here, Frankenhooker, which, was $1.5 million. It's like, I think they could have made a good movie for, 80 million, as opposed to whatever it was, 200, or, I think it was 200 million, right? Or 250.
I think
Um,
Godzilla minus one proved that you could do $15 million of special effects and make a fantastic movie.
yeah. Yeah,
And Godzilla looks
exactly.
amazing in that movie. Like I watched like Godzilla versus Kong. I like that movie too, but like they really had to spend like $130 million for this. Like, Japan used 15 million and just made an incredible looking Godzilla with all his powers, all the destruction. It was just amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think you can do it. I mean, obviously, with this movie, I mean, it's 1.5 million.
Right.
But it's like you can do it for less. And I think that might be, they were talking about, like, the CEO of Disney, how he's like, well, we're going to take fewer risks, and we're going to, that kind of thing. And people were trying to
Yeah.
make it sound like, that means they're just going to do, your straight white male hero thing that they did for the
Hmm.
first, run of the first phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But
Right.
I don't know that that's necessarily what the mindset is. I think it's more like, do we need to have the budgets go so high? Maybe one movie a year is the one that's the big budget one, that's like we put that much into it. But maybe there's ways that you can make these movies without putting so much into them so that they have to, be like the best thing ever when they come out of their first weekend. Because, if you make a movie for 80 million, you can have a slow first weekend and then eventually build. But if you make it for 250, if it doesn't do like the best weekend ever that first weekend, you're already sunk. You're already done.
Right. I think it's that plus I think he wants to focus on like a brand name characters. So like, we had Eternals that didn't really do well.
Right.
Or like maybe he wants to like maybe establish those characters in other films first, see how the reaction is to those characters, and then make a film out of that,
Yeah.
which I think is the smart way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's, you could sell those characters better that way.
As supporting characters first, and then like Black Widow, what he did with Iron Man.
Yeah.
She didn't have her own movie first. She was an Iron Man. People liked Scarlett Johansson, and went, okay, let's put her in the Avengers. And Avengers, she got a movie that wasn't great, but at least she got a movie.
Yeah, and I mean, she could have. I think the way that they introduced her, they could have had her movie in the second or third phase of the MCU.
They should have. Her and
Yeah,
Hawkeye should have a movie. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think I'm hearing the sirens on your end. I always get them on
Yeah.
my side here too as well.
I was by a fire station. I apologize.
Same. No, I'm the same thing. Same thing. I'm one block away from the fire station. So yeah. So that's why people listen to the pod. They're used to hearing the sirens come through. So, but yeah, it's funny because my nephew or my brother with his kids, they live in Maine and they're not used to it. And so it's like I remember talking to him on the phone for my birthday or something like that. And he was like, "What is that sound?" I was like, "Yeah, sirens. I hear them. Usually get every half hour or so. I get them."
Yeah, then summer's really bad.
Yeah, yeah. You
Well,
start.
and at
Yeah,
night, it's like, oh God, I gotta
yeah,
sleep.
yeah, yeah. And we're also near the sports complex here. We're about a mile away. So
Oof.
if something goes on down there, you get them all kind of heading down there. So yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Right. Well, yeah. Well, we're kind of we're at the point now where we're kind of the last act of Frankenhooker. We've got our Elizabeth is now in the brothel. She's talking to a guy who was talking to Zorro. So it looks like he's like a lower level pimp, I think.
yeah.
Well, actually, before that,
Oh
before she
yeah.
does that,
But she meets someone outside the train station.
that's right. That's right. She takes this guy back with her, who
Yeah.
I think I read in the trivia that he did commercials at that time.
He looks like a kind of guy that would do some kind of like
Right. Yeah.
grocery or like toilet paper commercial or something back in the
That's what I
day.
was gonna say. It was something like that. It was something like that. I'll have to see if I can pull it up here quickly because there wasn't one thing that's good about this movie is that there's not a ton of trivia, which it's like if you look at a Marvel movie, like the amount of trivia that you
Yeah.
get, it's ridiculous. But yeah, let's see here. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention is that the club, the bar that they hang out is called Huevos Grandes. Yeah, so it's just great that yeah, big eggs, big balls. Yeah,
Of course, Zorro will be there.
right, exactly. So you gotta love that kind of thing. Um, let's see here. Maybe I may have skipped it. I'm kind of skimming through here, but I can't. Um, let's see here. Now, maybe I missed it. Maybe I think I might have missed it who the name was, but yeah, I think they said it was like I can't remember what type of ads he did. It was like um, soup ads or something. Oh, Miracle Whip. That's what he did. Miracle Whip.
Oh
So
yes, yes.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He did
yeah.
look
Because
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah, because you also might have recognized him because so this was a Shapiro Glickenhaus film, and he was the pervert. He was a pervert in Exterminator. So they've used him
Yes.
before.
Yes.
Yeah,
I see them. Yes, yes.
yeah.
Yep,
So
you're right.
he's a that guy for sure. And they
He's great in the role though. He plays a perfect pervert. Like it's
exactly.
he'll
Yeah.
be the guy who wants this woman to have sex with him, like for real.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, he's all for it. They go up to the bedroom, and she's saying all kinds of random stuff that she's been saying, just like random quotes that the prostitutes had earlier in the film, and he's all for it. Whatever. Hey, let's go for it. And she takes off her bra, and that's when we see that she has purple nipples.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and then when they get on the bed and she starts kind of I don't know if she starts going at it with him, but we start to see smoke. Um,
Hmm.
and it's not clear right away what that is, but it turns out it's because the electricity that was used to bring her back to life, she that actually comes out of her while she's having sex, like out of her mouth and stuff like that.
Right, right. Yeah, she's killing her lovers at this point.
Right, exactly. And so I'm trying to think what happens then. Is did he blow up and he's not the one. No, it's the other guy that the guy with the ponytail who his head blows up and blows out the
Ye-
window.
Yeah, yeah. I think he just like no, his head does pop off his body
That's
because
right.
she holds the head.
That's right. She's holding the head up when he blows
Yeah,
apart. That's right.
he's still talking to her.
That's right. That's right. He talked with her for a little bit after, yeah, because that was a thing that they would talk about with the guillotine in France was that when somebody's head was chopped off, they were still alive
Yeah,
to actually roll and before for a little bit before they died. And so I guess Henenlotter was going with that there, where the head's talking to to Elizabeth just a little bit before he passes out.
yeah,
You know. So after these two kills, which the ponytail guy was great. So then she encounters this ponytail guy, um, who's just a classic '80s cheese guy.
yeah.
Yeah, he looks like, was it Milos, the tennis player on Seinfeld? Um,
Yes, he had like a Rico Suave Geraldo kind of
right,
vibe going on with him.
yeah, exactly. And so of
The
course,
very typical Latin lover,
right, yeah.
seduce any woman into bed. That kind of look.
Yeah, exactly. So he's all for it. So, she kisses him and the electricity in her mouth goes through him and yeah, it causes
Mhm.
his head to like what we see is we see the window and the head just goes throwing through, flying through the window.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect. So then we get to and actually one of the things I forget to mention about the scene where she gets reanimated. One of the things was he used up all of his Henenlotter used up all of his pyrotechnic budget on the hookers blowing up in that scene.
Oh,
And
okay.
so to do the scene in the shed, he had to get somebody, it was like an unlicensed guy. Um, and Lawrence, Frank, the guy who played Jeffrey Franken,
Yeah.
he recalled the guy saying to him after he finished setting up, "Don't worry, it's maybe safe."
Oh
So,
God.
yeah,
Guerrilla filmmaking at its finest.
exactly. That's the thing, right? That's the thing. I always joke about like with AIP action movies where those low budget ones where you'd see
Mm.
explosions stuff like that. That like there is a part of me that likes CGI for the fact that it can be safer. You know, but on the other hand, that sense of danger from these movies does add an
Yeah.
extra wrinkle.
Yeah. It's more realistic. You go, I could buy that happening. I could see someone getting
Yeah,
hurt from that. It's
right.
it's 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 perverse in a way, but at the same time, it's like I feel like I get more into that
Yeah,
watching that because I feel like that's what I'm here to watch. I could watch computer animated things all the time. I'd rather watch like practical effects just blow up, and if someone gets hurt out of it, that's a story to tell. You know?
right. Exactly, exactly. I think the only area that I prefer CGI to practical effects is when it's animals. I'm okay if like, hey, instead of getting the bear wrangler in, you got a fake bear, or a fake
Yeah,
lion or something like that.
yeah,
That
yeah,
I'm good with.
yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that.
But when it's this kind of thing, and again, like just the story, don't worry, it's maybe safe. I mean, even just that line, it's maybe
So
safe.
it should be the name of the documentary.
Exactly, it's maybe
Safe.
that's right. That would be awesome if he did a documentary about making this movie, because yeah, that would be in interviewing him, interviewing Lawrence, that would be fantastic. So after those two guys are killed, then we go back to Huevos Grandes, the
Yeah.
bar, where Zorro's hanging out, but she's just in there looking for another John. And Zorro's talking to another pimp, who's kind of like a lower level pimp. And when that guy sees her come in, he's like, "Oh, well, I need to get her. I'm gonna have sex with her, and maybe have her, be a part of my stable of women." And they go off to a table somewhere, and I don't know if he's like gonna go down on her, and I
Yeah.
guess what they imply, right, is that he goes
Yeah.
down on her and then just gets electrocuted, and
Yeah.
yeah, and that's when everybody freaks out because it's like the place starts to get caught on fire, like the explosion causes the fire and all of that, and that's when yeah, Zorro recognizes who this person is,
Mhm.
and then of course he sees I can't think of his name. Oh, Franken. He sees Franken come in to collect her, to collect Elizabeth and bring her home, and realizes like, oh, this is the guy that killed all of my women. And
Yeah.
so
Even before that, her neck comes off her body.
I forgot. That's right. He punched her. That's right. He
Yeah.
uppercut her. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. I forgot about that. That
So
they
you
were.
realize he has to go home and put bolts in her neck like Frankenstein's monster,
That's
just to keep it
right.
in place. And he's like
That's
kind of
right.
upset, like, damn, I have to do this to you. I'm sorry.
That's right. That's right. Because when the Zorro confronts her, she attacks him, and then he just uppercuts her, and her
Yeah,
head latch falls back. It's like hanging on by like the back skin,
yeah.
and there's like electricity flowing out of it, and that's when everybody's like, "We got to get out of here!" Like, and so then Franken comes
Sometimes
in.
New York is too New York for people.
Exactly. That one was too much, right? They can't handle that. There's also that joke where so Lawrence is like he chases after her. He goes into the city looking for her, and he's asking
Oh,
people if they've seen her. And he
yeah.
asks the Swedish guy, and the Swedish guy is like, says something in Swedish, and he's like, "What? What the hell are you talking Swedish to me in Times Square?" And it's like it was a line that made so much sense back then, but nowadays, right? Of course, Swedish people would be in Times Square.
Right. You also meet a religious guy.
That's right. That's right. Who tells him where to go? Right. He.
Oh yeah, he was
That's
right
right.
too. He's like, I was right. I was right.
Right. That's right. That's right.
He's sometimes like, yeah, you're right. Calm down. You're right. Yeah, I was right.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So they get in the car and they speed back home so that way he can put her back together, which
Yeah.
he's doing. At the same time, of course, when the electricity again, we talked about the fact that when the electricity hit her, it hit the refrigerator full of body parts,
Mhm.
and they're kind of shaking a little bit, and then Zorro shows up. Um, and actually, before Zorro shows up, he does some work on her, and I guess like he charge her with electricity again.
He does. Yeah, he
Yeah,
does. Yeah.
that's right. And suddenly she's back to herself. She's
Yeah.
her
He
regular.
remembers everything.
Yeah, and she realizes what he's done. He realizes that he's put her together with different body parts. She's like, this isn't my hand. These aren't my legs. This isn't my body.
Yeah, she's kind of disgusted with Jeffrey at this point. Like, how can you do this to me?
Right, right.
Just
It's
lie.
yeah. Which is funny because that means she also doesn't really warn him when Zorro shows up.
Right.
Because she watches Zorro come in from behind there and
Hmm.
he beheads her. Sorry, he beheads
Jeffrey.
Jeffrey, which is
Yeah.
completely out of nowhere almost. Like he just grabs a knife off the table and just in one motion.
That's a great effect too. I always laugh at these decapitation scenes in horror films. I'm like, isn't there like a spinal bone in the
Right,
middle?
right, exactly.
Like, how do you just cut your bone just so quickly like that? I always
Right.
always find that funny. I always watch it. I go, that's so funny.
Yeah. Yeah. The only one I could think of that used the spinal bone was in Bad Taste, right? When they
Yes.
they pull the guy and it's like the spine's hanging out and he like puts it on the
Yeah.
ground with rips it off with his foot and then punts the head out
It's
the
like
window.
combat. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But now we kind of get like the whole sort of ballroom blitz thing because um, in the struggle that ensues after the decapitation, um, Zorro knocks over the refrigerator, and all of these like congealed like merged body parts and heads and stuff come out, and they attack him. Um, this was like really like old like 50s 60s sci-fi
Yeah.
kind of thing, right? It was
Mhm.
like it also reminded me of Wynorski in Revenge of Swamp Thing or Return of the Swamp Thing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
It had like a society vibe, all the body parts together.
Yeah.
Basket Case Bilal
Oh
is like
yes.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was gross, but you knew it was coming, and you knew you were going to get something there. And then they pull him in, so that the refrigerator's turned upside down. They pull him into the refrigerator and shut the door and just kind of like just I guess like they eat him or whatever.
It's funny too because these like just like random like small body parts, and this guy's such a buff dude. Like how did he not fight them off?
Right,
And it's
exactly.
just like, oh, well, I guess these muscles were just for show at this point because like he's like, help me. He's like, you could just pull them off of you and just run out. But
Right, or kicked him, right? Kicked one,
uh,
I mean,
it's
yeah,
it's just a funny scene, but it's I think the special effects for that were really well done. Like
yeah,
it didn't look like claymation, it looked like stop motion. It looked like animatronics would like worked like they were really working.
yeah,
It was just done really well. Like I believe like these mutated things were attacking this guy. It
yeah.
didn't look fake at all.
Yeah, and he also kind of used real hands at
Yeah,
points.
okay, yeah,
Like
yeah.
so it's like animatronics and like puppets and stop motion,
Hmm.
and then he would also use real hands at points to grab him.
Yeah, it was filmed so well, like edited so well. Like you
Yeah,
you could believe that this guy was being tortured by these things.
yeah, Yeah. And again, we're getting to this $1.5 million budget, which again, 1.5 million in 1990 is,
A lot
you
of
know,
money.
right, wouldn't get you as far nowadays. So it was a good budget for them. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. Like, if you're doing like an action movie, and you tell, the distributor you want 1.5 million, they're probably like, oh, I mean, unless you're going to use it all on, Robert De Niro, Bruce Willis, or something like that.
Right,
Like,
right.
like they wouldn't give you that kind of money. So it is actually kind of a lot for him. But at the same time, what he does with the budget and the kind of the creative stuff that he thinks of. I mean, I wouldn't have thought like, okay, I've got all these body parts that I'm using to create this, the Elizabeth, Frankenhooker. I
Right.
wouldn't be thinking like, well, what am I going to do with the rest of the body parts? I'd just be like, okay,
Mhm.
that's it, those body parts. And he's like, no, 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 they're going to get hit by the lightning too while they're in the purple goo, and they're going to form into these like little things that attack him.
It's so well thought out. Like it's so creative. I wish more filmmakers would do stuff like this nowadays. I feel like everyone just wants to be like a brand or works for a company that
Yeah.
will pay them so they can have like a 3 film deal. This to me feels like a real true filmmaker that really wanted to bring a point across, and he brought it, and he brings it visually as well as narrative. You know what I mean? It's so well done, so well planned out. It's just as planned out as the opening credits where he's just making you know what I mean, the body parts. How would this work? How much electricity I need? I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. And I think like I read in the trivia that he had this whole thing mapped out, or he had to,
Yeah,
yeah,
you could tell. You could
yeah.
tell.
But I guess like he didn't tell the studio that this was what he had in mind. That
Uh,
I think he kind of made it sound like, just sort of a woman Frankenstein kind of thing. And they were like, oh, that sounds great. I know, like, what I was reading was that he called it Frankenstein 90. Um,
so he got
when he
away
was
with it.
right. That's how he used that so that he could go to like for example, like if he wanted to shoot in a place, well, oh, we're shooting Frankenstein 90 as opposed to Frankenhooker, because he was afraid that like people heard Frankenhooker, they're like, you're not going to shoot here. I don't want that movie here.
Yeah.
So that was the title he was using to kind of get away with some of this stuff.
It's smart filmmaking.
Yeah, it is. You make a really great point about this kind of movie. Is we're kind of almost to the end here. We're almost we're maybe I'll do our last part here, and then we can yeah, we
Yeah.
can kind of do some final, because the last part is the big reveal. Like you said, kind of the message that Henenlotter was going for here, the big twist at the end. Um, we kind of cut away, and then Franken wakes up, and he's there. We see his head. We know he'd just been decapitated.
Right.
And one of the things I forgot to mention is that uh, Franken says that his serum, I guess that's what the purple liquid is,
Mhm.
it only works with women that, with people with high estrogen,
Yeah.
women specifically. So
Yeah.
you can't use it on men. You can't bring back men. Um, so we have a sense of where this might be going, but here's Franken. He's come back to life. I initially thought, because I had forgotten about that fact. I'd forgotten about the part about the it being only working on women. So I thought the big reveal was going to be that he had Zorro's body.
Right. Right.
It
Right.
was going to be like, okay, I'm going to have like, I want a big buff husband, so I'm going to give him Zorro's body. But no, as we kind of pull away, we realize that it's just more, hooker body parts that she used until she gave him a woman's body. He's like, what does he say? Where's my schlong, or where's my? I can't remember what he
Yeah.
called it.
And then he called it something, but yeah, he was wondering what his penis was. Like he's like that was the main concern. Main concern was where his penis was.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, so that's kind of like the big, I mean, it's very much like movies like this would do. I mean, especially like those sick, 50s and 60s ones. They would always have some sort of like hook at the end
Mhm.
like that. Um, and this is that hook. And of course, like, the way she talks about it is so great. She's like, well, I had to do it. Which is something like, this is what I had to do. This is what, because
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 that's
he's
what he
like,
told her when she remembers him. The same
exactly.
dialogue.
Yeah, yeah,
So
exactly.
it was revenge. She got revenge on him.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the perfect kind of ending there. And I think, kind of to your point, like how, Henlotter had this message kind of throughout about like a woman, women's bodies, and,
Right.
right, or the perfect
Don't play
woman and all of
God.
that.
Don't play
Yeah,
God. You know,
right, right, exactly. And the
that's a natural thing. Why are you messing with it?
right, right, exactly. And it kind of comes back to get him, at the end. That yeah, that's what ends up happening to him. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, obviously, I think let me see if it says here. If it had, oh, my Johnson. That's what he says. Where's my Johnson? What did you do to me,
Oh,
Elizabeth?
okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Mike
Um,
Johnson.
yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, to your point, as we kind of wrap this one up here, as we're we've hit the end here. I mean, like you said, like like a lot of times, like you said, with horror movie, directors nowadays, there's kind of a combination of things. Like one, getting the budget to be able to make a movie like this. Like I don't think, I think if you talk to indie horror directors now, if they were told they could get $1.5 million to make a movie, even by today's standards, they would love it, because it's like they've got to like crowd fund for 50 or 60 grand. Um, but I still think the resourcefulness of Henenlotter combined with the creativity and the imagination to make this movie is just so fantastic.
Yeah, it's just amazing like how much he was able to do with $1.5 million. Like it's just a simple story, everybody knows the Frankenstein story, and you have to change it around obviously. And he did it in a way that, you kind of laugh at it, but at the same time you go, this character deserved what he got. It was a
Right?
revenge tale. Like you need to let the past go, or else it's gonna bite you in the ass. And that's what happened to him.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And it is funny because like, at the beginning of the story, it's like the mom is telling him, you got to get over
Hmm.
Elizabeth, this girl at the store who's been asking about you, which I get that piece, right? That maybe it's been too soon and you don't want to get over it. You can't just get over it. But by the same token, right, like, there's a fine line between, giving yourself time to grieve and then getting over it and saying, no, I'm going to put my girlfriend back together with other people's body parts and do that. But by the same token, it's like this idea that like he's such a genius. He's this like mad genius that it's
Hmm.
like, he's just so obsessed.
I can fix her. I can fix this. I
Yeah.
could be happy. There's a reason why I'm this smart. I'm going to use it. And he knows what he's doing is wrong. It's not like he doesn't know. But he
Yes.
kind of was like, but he also kind of is very judgmental about other people too.
Yes.
Like the scene with the hookers, these two girls making nice. Like, don't do that. That's wrong. The body's not made for that. Like, it's like, who are you to judge anybody? Like, you just brought them into life.
Yes. Right. Because I don't know if it was that kind of a thing too, where it's like being from Jersey, he was like more conservative and
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like go to see the city and it's like you just, it's like the whole thing just completely shocks him.
It also shows his hypocrisy. Like he's
Yeah.
showing pictures of naked women with like, these
Right.
porn star bodies, but yeah, he's very like, oh, you can't do that with your body. Like he's trying to control women in a way. So
Right. Well, that's a good point. I never really thought about that's actually a really good point that like that idea of sort of like right like like a guy trying to like we think of so many horror movies that where it's like some kind of like stalker kind of thing or
mhm.
like there's that whole torture porn thing where like women would be captured by that kind of thing. There was that kind of like real obvious sort of situation where this right it's like Franken does not ask Elizabeth. I mean, he can't, right? Because she's dead.
Right,
But he
right,
doesn't think like, well, how would she feel about being brought back to life
right.
with other body parts, and how would she feel about any of that? He just thinks about himself and how this is my girlfriend and I want her. Um, and it is a kind of a form of like controllingness, right?
Yeah,
That it's not as overt in the way that like a straight ahead like slasher movie with stalkers, that kind of thing would be, or like a like a Lifetime movie, right? With the stalker or something like that. This isn't quite that, but the message is the same.
yeah, yeah. He figures I'm a man. I'm gonna do what I want.
Yeah,
That's my girl. I don't want to be alone.
yeah,
I'm gonna do things that aren't moral, but I'm gonna do them anyway because I want to be happy. Screw everybody else. It's very selfish. Yet that's why he gets karma at the end because he's
yeah.
just so focused on himself. He's not seeing anything around him. What's happening? He doesn't really think about what other people will think. Like, what was he gonna do with this girl this whole time? Like, just bring her out to dates? Like, no one's gonna like think twice. Like, what's going on here?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
you don't
Yeah,
think.
yeah, that's a good point too, right? Because it's like, right, how did he think she was gonna, I guess he had in his mind, he had this dream that like her everything was gonna be seamless and,
Right.
it would look great and that wasn't what happened. Yeah, it's and like you said, he gets I mean, and of course, with this being a horror comedy, the comeuppance at the end is hilarious, right? It's not like in a straight ahead horror film where it's like the baddie gets, the person in this role gets killed, or gets killed in a crazy way or something like that. This is like a humorous ending, but it's still comeuppance.
I'm just gonna say again, if you have Hulu, watch Poor Things. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yes. Yeah, I do have Hulu, so I do need to watch it. I do need to see this. I
Yeah,
need to
it's,
definitely.
it, I was just the ending are very similar in a
Okay.
way.
All right, perfect. Well, I'll definitely check it. Yeah, everybody else I know has seen it. I'm notoriously bad about getting out to, like, when I saw the Marvels while it was still in the theater, that was rare for me, to go out and see something, because like I had planned to see Madam Web, and it just it was
God,
out before I had a chance, because I wanted to see I wanted to see kind of what everybody else was talking about.
so bad.
Yeah.
That's probably the worst movie of the year so far. I'm sorry.
Is it? Yeah. It's well. That's what I wanted
It'll
to.
be on
Yeah.
Netflix eventually since it's Sony, so you'll get to see
Yeah.
it eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Because I know Morbius is. I mean, I remember some friends of mine up in Maine went. They like made a night of it. They all just went and saw it. And I was like, I kind of, I'm kind of curious about it. I'm kind of, because it's one of those things. Like once you start getting the bad reviews, and my
Yeah.
sister and brother-in-law got me a Fandango gift
Mm,
card, but then I was like, well, if I'm going to use that, I feel like I should use it for a movie that like I really want to see, as opposed to like one that I'm seeing because I want to see what like all the fuss is about.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I tell everybody to watch it once just to see how bad it is.
Right.
Like I think Morbius is a better movie to be honest with you, and
Yeah.
that's not that great either. But
Right.
that shows the difference between that and this. Like I feel like Madam Web is just made just to keep rights to a character.
Right.
Sony wants Spider-Man. They didn't want to lose that character, so let's make a Spider-Verse that no one cares about any of these characters other than Spider-Man and Venom.
Right.
Um, and this movie is made from a man who has a point to say, and he's very creative in how he's saying it, and he's using this small budget to really make this his film bigger than it should be, and people still talking about it today. You know what I mean? In a good way.
Yeah.
So it just shows that creativity back then was more alive than it is in 2024.
Yeah, because the one thing that that I would love to see, but I don't think you would see, is for Sony to go to Henenlotter and say, "Hey, we get this property, Madam Web. She's like you know a Spider Woman who can like see the future, and then we get some other characters and stuff like that. What could you give us? Like, if we gave you these characters? What would you make?" And
Right.
just have them outline it, and just tell us, and if it sounds good enough. It would sound, because I mean, you think about like Sam Raimi, I mean,
Mhm.
look what he did with Spider-Man, and it's like, he's doing Evil Dead, with again similar kind of budget. He makes the Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. He's not really working on, and he gets to do a Spider-Man. I mean, these guys I think could do some interesting stuff with, Carpenter. I mean, I know Carpenter, I don't think he's done anything since The Ward.
Right.
Yeah, but I mean, can you imagine having Carpenter do like something like that? But Henenlotter in particular, I think I like for this movie for Madam Web because it takes place in New York, and I think he would have used a different New York. I think I don't know exact for that movie, but like what we talked about, how he makes New York a unique character.
You're right. I feel like you have to have people that are fans and care about the story that the film they're making. I just feel like a lot of directors today are just more focused on what they're getting paid,
Yeah.
if they're gonna be nominated for an Oscar. Um, will I have a job if this movie's successful? It's all about like it's very selfish in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, like you talk about Sam Raimi, he just did Doctor Strange, the second one,
Yeah.
Multiverse of Madness, and I felt like there's a lot of Sam Raimi in it, but at the same time, I feel like the studio stepped in and kind of reined him in.
Yeah.
So it's like a very Disney-fied Sam Raimi, and
Oh
it's like
yeah.
if he had let him loose, who knows what that film would have been.
Yeah, that's the other problem, I think, to your point, is that there's so many of these brands, right? And granted, like, Henenlotter is in a way thinking of a brand in the sense of like, this character Frankenhooker is like kind of the, even though she's only in the movie from like the 50-minute mark on, so she's like maybe like the last 20-25 minutes of the movie, she's even in the film. But it's kind of like with Lloyd Kaufman in the if you watch the documentary on the Roger Corman Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
He said that they came to him first to make that Fantastic Four. And he said, no, we've got our own characters that we want to make our movies with because we can do what we want with them, with Toxic
Right.
Avenger or, Sergeant Kabuki Man or whatever. We can do the things we want to do with them. And we don't have Marvel telling us how to make the movie. And we don't want that. And I do think that's a good point that, like, if you let it, like there's no way, you're right. If Sony would really have to be like somebody would have to just be like, just let's close our eyes and just like let this movie happen and let Henenlotter do it.
I mean, I rather fail being creative than succeed just being like everybody else, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because you know what, to your point on that, the thing that's big about failing while being creative is there's always that second act for movies
Right.
like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a cult movie, and it didn't make a lot of money, but people still talk about it. Look all the stream platforms it's on right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere. Everybody can see Basket Case. Everybody can see that.
Yeah.
It's those films. These films live on forever. Like you can watch Madam Web. Yeah, watch it once, and then probably never watch it again. It's so bad. It's
Right.
and you just wasted like, well, I don't know how much it cost to make, maybe $150 million, like down the drain.
Yeah. Yeah, it was something in that range, and it's like, and granted, I mean, that movie, I mean, again, I haven't seen it, but I mean, it seems like the whole concept of it was sauteed in wrong sauce, where it's like, the characters don't get to be superheroes at all until like there's like, I guess like the main
Exactly.
right, the main baddie has images of them. Whereas like, even though this movie, it took a long time to get to the payoff of the Frankenhooker, it's still like, Henenlotter comes into this with he had a co-writer in Robert Martin, but he came into this with a clear, cohesive idea of what he wanted to do. And I think that's I think some of these ones that don't work out the way that they're supposed to. I think that's part of it, is like you said, that they're trying to milk a brand. They're trying to get something out of a brand. They're trying to play it safe. They're afraid to upset people. And so by being afraid to upset people, I mean, if Frank Henenlotter was afraid to upset people, I don't think we get anything here with this movie.
Right. Yeah, it's and that's the problem with society today. Everybody's so sensitive to things.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I sometimes I admire like directors like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, because they kind of go like outside the box and make movies like Hereditary, Midsummer, The Witch,
Mm,
The Lighthouse. That was a very like bizarre movie, but it was him. Like it was
yeah.
his creation. So even if it probably didn't do that well, people still talk about that movie because it was a creative movie. Like it was substance to it. And I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of these directors are making movies that, yeah, they're great. Sometimes they make a lot of money, but 10 years from now, are you going to really watch them again? Are you going to talk about these movies in 10 years? Like it's because it's just going to have another sequel, another reboot, whatever.
Right.
Does it really matter at this point? Like it's like, it feels like just another chapter in a book,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and I mean, and you make a great point too, because think about Henenlotter, right? That it's right, like there's an authenticity that comes with these movies,
Yeah.
but also, even though he's not afraid to offend people, he doesn't do anything that's like offensive, in the sense that like he's never punching down on anybody. He's not doing any kind of like, there's nothing like racist, or if anything sexist in this movie. It's the characters, and it's not shown as like a great thing. And so I think that's the other thing too about movies like this, is that like, we talk about it like, like, oh, well, cancel culture is bad and all that kind of thing. But it's like with Henenlotter, he does it. He's not just out there to just to offend people, but he's also not afraid of he's not trying to make a big tent project, I guess, is the thing. It's like he's just like, I'm making this movie, and there's going to be a certain market that's going to really enjoy it, and I'm making it for that market. And I think these big studios are afraid to make movies like this anymore. They just everything has to be for as many people as possible.
Yeah. I think some movies you have to offend people for it to work. That's how it resonates.
Right.
But I feel like this movie does that, but at the same time, it gives you a payoff.
Yeah.
There's a reason why these things are happening, why you're feeling a certain way about this guy who's like pretty much a misogynist. He's a sexist. He's controlling. All these men in this movie are very controlling
Yeah.
of the women they're with, and that's really the point. All these men get their comeuppance at the end. The
Yeah.
women are the ones really in power at the end. They're the ones that really won. If you really think about it. So
Yeah.
it's the message, it's the messaging that's really important.
Yeah, and it really works. I mean, you think about the fact that Frankenstein was written by a woman, by Mary Shelley, and of course, Elizabeth's last name is Shelley.
Right. Yeah.
So they kind of pay homage to that in here,
Mhm.
and so yeah, that's a great thing that like yeah that like you said that these chauvinistic characters they get their comeuppance. I mean, there isn't really a guy in this that's necessarily likable. I don't
No,
think.
not at all. Yeah.
Yeah, they all kind of get. I mean, the Swedish guy's not bad with his Batman shirt on and stuff like that.
And I guess the religious guy is okay too. He didn't do anything wrong. He was right the whole time. So
Exactly, exactly. So but for the most part, right, the guys in this are, and but I think that also helps too because one, like you said, the message is there, but also two, it's fun to see all the
yeah,
bad stuff happen to them.
it's not taking itself seriously. That's why it works.
Yeah,
It's a silly concept and it plays it as it is. And
yeah,
it knows what kind of movie it is. It plays it exactly what you think it's gonna play as. And at the end you're satisfied. You got what you wanted. This guy, she got his revenge on this guy, and this guy is now gonna have made to suffer as another Frankenhooker in a way. So
right,
it's like
right.
there's two of them now. So it's great.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and I also heard that Lawrence suffered in real life when they did that scene at the end where he's
Mhm.
supposed to be on the table because he had to stand with his head through um
Right.
the table so that he was
So,
above the prosthetic body underneath him. And I guess he had to pee in a coffee cup because he was there for like 5 hours
oh God.
doing that scene. So again, that's the thing, right? But it's funny because this movie we say, oh, he had to stand there for 5 hours and do that, but it's like these comic book movies for people to do their prosthetics and uh,
Yeah,
makeup and
makeup
stuff.
stuff.
They're
Yeah.
there for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then they got to work in front of a green screen the whole time. So it's like,
right.
I'd rather be doing this than working in front of a green screen and trying to fight an imaginary monster I don't see.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's
it,
I'm sure
and it,
I'm sure it's fulfilling as an actor too. You feel like you earned that
yeah,
role.
right. You can tell people that you did this stuff.
Right. Yeah. I have
Exactly.
a story to tell my kids. You know.
Yeah, and I think to your point too about these Marvel movies, because I think as we're wrapping up here and kind of talking about like sort of the legacy of this movie, I think think about the first Avengers movie where they essentially destroy New York, and
Mhm.
that was an interesting scene for me when I watched it because I hadn't seen the Avengers before. I saw it recently, so so it however many years later, but I was thinking about it because for people our age, seeing New York get destroyed like that, it
Yeah.
brings up images,
Yeah.
of 9/11, that kind of thing, and I was like, wow, has it been long enough that you could, because in this the movie was made in what I think was it 20
2012.
2012, so I was like, boy, 11 years is that long enough from that you could make a movie like that. But what I realized, oh, go ahead.
You have to remember Cloverfield did the same thing,
Right.
and that was in 2008.
That's
And I
right.
remember watching that and being feeling very like unnerved by that. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't that far away. And I remember 9/11 very clear. I lost people in 9/11. So it was like kind of to me like this is very like maybe too soon, too
Yeah.
close to home. And I think that's why that movie works.
Yeah.
Like you kind of like invested like what the hell is like going on here. I've kind of been through this, and I'm kind of hoping these characters get out of this because I don't want anyone to suffer more than they already have. You know what I mean? It could be a powerful thing if you do it right, and I think
Yeah.
both those films do it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, that was part of it was I was like, wow, okay, like with Avengers, it was like, I'm watching these scenes and I'm like, but then, like you said, like you see the police officers there and,
Right.
they're getting people to safety and you never, we find out later, right, in Hawkeye you know, um, that,
Traumatized by it, yeah.
right, that the dad died, I think, her
Yeah.
dad,
Yeah.
yeah, Kate Bishop, that's her character
Bishop,
name.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
PTSD, all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's yeah, why I was like, wow, this is, like you said, it kind of brings back some of those feelings. But then, granted for me, I lived in Maine at the time, and so it was like really unique for me when I would go to, like, for example, when I went to DC not long after I went to Boston. where some of the planes came out, and it was like a whole different vibe, down there. After what happened with 9/11, it was hit much closer to home. But also too, like I knew people that, because a lot of pilots that fly out of Boston live in my hometown area. And so there was some that people knew that had died there. But it was like, being closer to it, it was like, wow, you kind of, you could feel it more. But I think for younger people that are kind of bigger in the Marvel fans, like I realized like, oh, well, if you were born in, say, like 92, or even later, like maybe you were born in like, 95, you'd be really young for 9/11. And so it wouldn't, if you're seeing it with the Avengers, maybe it doesn't quite resonate the same way, that you're like, oh wow, this is like bringing back memories of things on TV and things like that, that drew that in. And I think that's one of the things for the Marvel fans, is there's so many of them that are younger, that see like New York in a different way from the kind of the New York of the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, yeah, it's very generational. Like I think it's funny because I talk to like younger people and I think a lot of them don't get it.
Yeah.
They don't get like the trauma, the experience of what that was.
Yeah.
It's you feel like you're talking to like aliens in a way. Like you don't like you gotta kind of explain it to them, show them footage of it, and they're still kind of like that's messed up, but like it doesn't resonate with them.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like, I think, like with older generations, that lived through
Your
like
mom,
yeah, or
all
like
stuff.
Kennedy's assassination, something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah, or Pearl Harbor, like you said. I remember my grandfather was trying to tell me what happened. My grandfather, he would bounce between stories. I'm kind of like how I do, but he would really kind of bounce between things. And he was telling me about when he remembered Pearl Harbor when he lived in Boston. But he started talking about all kinds of other stuff, working at the Ritz-Carlton, and I don't know what else. So I never got to actually find out what it was like when he heard that. But that was the only comparison we really had, I think, was that, and maybe Kennedy's assassination. When 9/11 happened, there weren't really a lot of precedent for that kind of thing in America.
I mean, there was like some bombings, like the Oklahoma City and stuff like that,
Yeah,
but
that's right, Oklahoma City. Yeah,
it wasn't like 9/11. Like 9/11 was like I think that was like a major shift to
yeah.
everything.
Yeah. And it changed everything. And I think it's for people to understand, like, that don't, because I remember talking to one of my coworkers who was born in 96. She couldn't remember a time that you could fly and not have to take your shoes off when you went through the
Right.
airport.
Like TSA, all that stuff. Yeah.
Right. And I remember the first time I flew after that, I was like, I flew out of the very small airport in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, to see my grandparents in Florida. And even there they had, Air National Guard, kind of patrolling the airport. And it was like that feeling of like, this is a different, the airport used to be like this very lax kind of thing, where
Mhm.
I mean, movies would do it all the time, right? Where they'd have like the romantic, end where they would,
Yeah.
you
Between each
know,
other, just make out. Yeah.
right, exactly. And so that was like that, and of course the airlines have sort of capitalized on it by making it so, like, they can charge for all kinds of stuff, and all that kind of thing. But it was like a whole change of, the flying became a completely different thing. But also, I think, the way people saw things politically, it was very, it led to a big war in Iraq
Yeah.
and Afghanistan. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. Like every 20 years, I feel like something happens and it
Yeah.
changes things. And I feel like that was like I feel like that was really like the turning point. Like, social media blew up after that.
Yeah.
Technology got more advanced. There was more like stricter laws
Yeah.
placed. I think a lot more conservatives kind of grew into power after that.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I sometimes remember like I watched a movie or TV show and go, man, do you remember when that used to be able to do? Like I watched like Airplane, the original Airplane, 1980s Airplane.
Oh
And
yes. Yeah.
they're like so different than it is
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Anybody like, do anything in the airport. Now you have to really be like looking over your shoulder if a cop sees you or a TSA agent sees you. Like
Yeah.
you can't carry any weapons with you. You have to make
Right.
sure you have nothing on you that can be perceived as something dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
It's different.
It's like, because I was visiting my family in Maine, and Pennsylvania is not one of the states that has legalized recreational marijuana.
Right.
So I was visiting my family in Maine. It is legal. Recreational is legal. And there was like a place that sold their own gummies. Like they made their own gummies. They were cheap. It was like $20 for a 10, canister of 10, which is like, here in New Jersey, if you go to, and I know in New York City, I've gotten them there too, where it's like a lot more, it costs a lot more for them. So I was like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, well, then I'm like, how am I going to get them home? And I've got like 3 containers of gummies, and I got to go through TSA, and it's still illegal because weed is still illegal federally. So what I did is I got those Welch's grape, fruit snack things, and I just opened it up, and I kept the the bulk of them in there, and then I just threw the rest of the gummies in there and just mixed them around. And they actually did search my bag when I went through TSA, and they felt the bag of the Welch, and I was like, oh man, are they gonna and then they just let me go, and they were like, okay, you're fine, and so I was like, all right, I don't know if they thought if maybe I did something suspicious because I was nervous about having the gummies.
Yeah, you can't give yourself away a little bit.
Right, exactly. But when he was feeling it, I was like, oh, because I guess what it is, because the fact that the bag was open maybe tipped them off that something was wrong. And they thought maybe I had like weapons or something in it. Because I guess you could. I guess if you were going to bring a knife on the plane, you could stuff it in a thing of gummies, and it might not.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, you're right. It's like it's hard, I think, for people that were younger because I think myself being growing up in the 80s, and it's like I don't I remember Reagan a little bit, but not I just remember him kind of being this bad thing that was kind of over everything. But like it's kind I didn't really know it to the extent that like I would remember Clinton and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I remember the last half of the Reagan stuff, not the first
Right.
half. And the
Yeah.
last half was the really bad stuff, like the AIDS crisis, all that stuff happened. The
Right.
recession that happened in '87, I think it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Challenger explosion that happened, I remember
That's
that.
right.
That's the
Yes.
first major news thing I remember was the Challenger thing.
Yeah. Now I don't know because where I grew up, because the one of the women on the Challenger, she was from New Hampshire, like a neighboring town. So we
Mm.
watched it live in school, and
Yeah, I did
because it was
too.
yeah, you watched it in live school. Yeah, I think I was gonna say I think most people our age watched it live in school, and it was like one of those things like the teachers didn't know what to do when it happened. Yeah, it was amazing. It's like you said, like these kinds of things, and I guess like now it's a completely different thing where it's like, what do teachers do when kids like can't come to school because the schools are closed because of the pandemic, and they've got to suddenly teach online to a whole bunch
Right.
of 6-year-olds who can't
Mhm.
can't sit still for 5 minutes in a classroom, let alone in front of a computer.
And that hurts kids because they can't socialize in
Yeah,
person. They're
yeah,
stuck to a computer.
yeah, yeah. Well, because that's the thing, right? Is that at least when we were at least when there's no pandemic, right? Like even if you were homeschooled, you could still socialize outside
Outside, yeah.
after school with other
Sports,
kids.
yeah. Yeah, play
Yeah,
video games or whatever, yeah, in
yeah.
person.
Yeah, and now with the pandemic, there was none of it for a whole chunk of time, and it's like, for us as adults, you could handle it a little bit better because you sort of understood you had a better sense of yourself as an
Right.
adult.
Mhm. Yeah,
The kid, you're still forming that identity.
yeah. It's going to be interesting how this next generation fares because I'm just like, will they be better than the last one? Will they be more lazier? Will they be more indifferent to things?
Yeah,
I feel like politics and the social stuff is really like taking over everything.
yeah.
Just wondering like how will these kids move forward from this? Like, will they be more conservative? Will they be more liberal? Would be a mix? Would there be a revolution eventually? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one thing we see here in Philadelphia with younger kids, especially the ones that go to college at like, University of Penn or Drexel, a lot of them have this idea that like they shouldn't have to pay to use the subway. Which,
Mm,
hey, maybe that's an overarching idea that maybe, the subway should be free, or, that I totally get it, right? But the
right.
reality is right now you got to pay to use the subway because that's how the subway is funded. Like if you don't pay, there's no money for it. But they just have decided, no, you know what? We're not paying, and they jump the turnstiles. They just
Happens.
and yeah,
See all the time.
yeah, it's and so it's interesting to see kind of like you said, like because they have more access to a lot of political ideas that for us growing up it was like maybe a dude at a Rage Against the Machine concert who had like a booth or something would be show but you couldn't just go on the internet and just find it everywhere, or let alone people on Twitter like just sending out threads of like information about stuff. And so now it's like they get information from so many places, and it's like they have a lot of information to build their opinions on. But then it's also like, yeah, it's kind of like, okay, well, some dude on TikTok said I shouldn't be, that the subway should be free, so I'm gonna not pay to use the subway. And then it's like, yeah, but the $2, it's only $2 to ride the subway in Philadelphia if you use your Apple Pay. Like they need the money. Like the subway here gets no money from the state of Pennsylvania. Like but they don't look at it that way. They look at it as, well, none of us should have to pay to use it. It should be funded by everybody. And it's like, well, yeah, but nobody's funding it right now. This is how it's funded. Until we change it, you gotta pay.
Yeah, it's interesting talking to younger people because like they have so many different perspectives of things, and
Hmm.
I feel like the older generations kind of been through a lot of things, like dollar changes.
Yeah,
So I think we kind of see it a little bit more rationally,
yeah,
and they kind of more like, no, we need this now kind of mentality. Like this needs to change.
yeah,
Like this is like your generation's messed it up for us. It's like, it's very like it's an interesting experiment to live in. 'Cause I feel like
yeah,
this whole life is an experiment,
yeah,
and we're just like things are changing. There's always placebo, but then someone decides is going, let me change this a little bit, and then all of a sudden chaos happens.
right, right. Well,
It's just like
because
how do I overcome chaos now? Oh, okay, we're fine now. Let me change this
right,
part now.
yeah,
Chaos.
yeah.
That's how it is.
Well, because look at, like, just looking at Frankenhooker, for us growing up, right? Like when we would have watched Frankenhooker in 1990, it would have been at the video store.
Yes.
And even that was kind of a relatively new thing, right? Because VHS kind of takes off in
Mhm.
the 80s.
Right.
So even for 1990, like by 1990, VHS had kind of really established itself, where it was like you could buy, like earlier than that, you couldn't just go out and buy a VHS. You buy
Very
like blank
expensive
tapes,
back
maybe
then.
record. Yeah. So even that, like the fact that, okay, you know, Henenlotter could make Frankenhooker with the idea in mind that he could screen it on some theaters, but also make a good amount of money in the video store by having video store places buy it, and then also people like us, like maybe pick it
Rent
up
it.
and buy it at some point. And then it doesn't take long, right? It's almost like 10 years later that DVD becomes the thing.
Hmm.
And nobody wants VHS anymore because it's DVD. And so then it's like a movie like a Frankenhooker could be re-released, right, with a
Right.
new, like, DVD form but that's the thing too, is like, Frankenhooker would have had to have been, had to be one of those ones like, Frankenhooker or, Basket, or like, Bad Taste or Evil Dead, that had enough of a following that you could make a DVD of it. The other ones got left behind. They
Right. Right.
only
Yeah.
stayed VHS. And then, but at the same time with the video store, right? Like you think of like Blockbuster, you know, running all the mom and pop video stores out of business, at least, especially in the suburbs. And then Netflix coming and running them out of business.
Yeah.
And then Netflix running the DVD industry out of business through streaming, and now it's like DVD is kind of more of a boutique thing. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you talk about Best Buy also running the DVD industry out of business, because Best Buy was like, we could sell DVDs for a lot cheaper because we don't care if you only spend $10 on this DVD when another place is selling it for 20, because we want you to buy the TV that's going to be worth a lot more, and
Right.
then Netflix ran them, they stopped selling DVDs, and now it's like, having to, all that kind of stuff. And we've seen the whole thing, right? We've seen it essentially from when, VHS was really expensive. It was like $80 to buy a tape and only video stores could buy it, to when everybody could get VCRs and VHS tapes and everything were affordable, to DVDs, to streaming. We've kind of seen the whole thing happen. And I think it is interesting for kids who are growing up with just streaming, or just, um, it like you said, they don't have the perspective of the whole thing.
Yeah. I feel like they probably
Oh,
like, you still there?
oh yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, I think it just blipped out for a second.
Oh, okay. Yeah, but I feel like these kids that just want to like, I think they feel like we like live this like we live this really hard life. Like,
Right,
why did you make this so hard on yourselves? Like, you don't understand. We had earned all
right,
this Netflix stuff and this,
right,
you know, all this technology that you have, iPhones, Spotify now that's taken away from CDs.
right, right.
You guys got it easy. You're
Yeah,
spoiled. We
yeah,
had to fight for this stuff.
right. Yeah,
You know
did
what
you
I mean?
ever get that moment where you're in the store or something and you hear a song and you want, like, you really like, and you're almost like, oh, I want to stay in the store and listen to it longer. And then it's like, oh, I can just play it on Spotify, you know?
Yes,
Uh,
Mark, that happens all the time.
yeah. I mean, remember as
That's
a kid,
like you. I'll listen to it when it's
right? Exactly.
it's weird. It's
Uh,
like,
yeah. I remember as a kid, having the tape recorder, the boombox, or whatever, with the blank tape in it, and listening to
mm-hmm.
the radio and waiting for the song I like to be on so I could
Do that.
record it.
Yeah,
Um,
do that.
Yeah, and of course you'd get the DJ sometimes doing the back cell over it, and you're like, can you just shut up? I want the song, and now it's like, well, just cue it up on Spotify and or YouTube. When I'm at work, it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, it's like I just throw on YouTube while I'm working on something and play whatever song I want.
it's crazy how fast everything advanced.
Yeah, yeah, it is absolutely amazing, and I think one thing that's great about Frank. I mean, Frank Hooker is now 34 years old, and which is crazy to think that it's that old. But I think again, with one of the advantages to the current, uh, mark or climate is that younger people who are listening to this podcast. And we do get some. Most people are kind of in our age bracket, but we do have some younger people that listen. Movies like this are available now in ways that they weren't before, and so you can go on Tubi and watch Frankenhooker, and there really isn't much in terms of commercials for it. And the boobs were all there. It wasn't like anything was
Right.
edited. Not only were the real boobs there, but the fake boobs, because I think we forget to mention that Franken had a whole like tub of fake boobs when he was.
Yep, sure did.
Yeah, I heard that Henenlotter handed those out as gifts at the end at the wrap party. Um,
That's awesome.
yeah, exactly. Imagine like yeah. I was my wife and I watched this show called Collector's Call on VTV where they people have these big collections of things. It would be hilarious if somebody had like I'm sure they would edit it out, but if they like
Sorry, yeah.
yeah, for
Something.
$10,000 I got these fake boobs at auction that were used on the film Frankenhooker. It's like but all of the whole movie's intact, and it's in like, the commercials. I think there was twice that there were commercial breaks when I was watching it. Some movies, newer movies, have more on Tubi,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
this one didn't. So and of course, I think all of Henenlotter's earlier films, I think Basket Case, Brain Damage, and also the sequels to Basket Case are all on Tubi.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I
He's
think
awesome with that stuff.
yeah. I think for kids out there listening, for younger people, but also I think older people who haven't seen one of these in a while, I think it's good to go back to these. I'm learning this more and more about that I get so wrapped up in watching whatever the newest stuff is that
Mhm.
I forget to sometimes go back to these ones because these were the ones that kind of got me into movies, and
Right, right.
that all my friends and I watch and love, and this movie has that feel. It has that late '80s, early '90s horror comedy feel to it that just is going to take you back, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, I like watching like older horror films too, because feel like when you're watching them at the time it comes out, you're just looking for maybe the special effects,
Right.
nudity, whatever,
Right.
just the laughs. Now as you're older, you go, wow, this movie's about this.
Yeah.
It's telling me this. I understand that. Oh, it's a real movie. It has a story. I understand the characters. And it's like you see something different.
Yeah.
And I also say the younger generation should watch these because now you can see them in HD. We didn't have that option back then.
Yes, that's right. We were watching on VHS tapes with bad tracking, and
HD 4K, that changes the movie a lot, especially an
right.
older one. I see
Yeah.
I see like Lucio Fucci movies in like 4K. I'm like, holy crap, this is like a different movie.
Yeah. Yes, which is amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I remember Simon of Explosive Action sent me like VHS rips of movies like Strike Commando, and
Mm,
Robo War,
yeah.
Red Brown movies. They're all on, Severin put out like fancy, Blu-ray versions of them, 4K versions of them.
Yeah.
They're all on Tubi now. Yeah, I think it's on the one hand, there was a charm to watching the way we watch them, but on the other hand, it is fantastic that younger people can be introduced to these movies now in a way that like for us to get introduced to something from 30 years ago in the '90s, it would have been something from the '60s. You would have, it would have been if it was showing on the local broadcast channel,
Right.
on a weekend or something. You sort of stumble upon it. Now you can just scroll on Tubi and find it.
Yeah, and now you don't have to squint to watch to see what's going on in the movie because it's
Right?
actual lighting now. They
Yes.
upgraded.
Yeah, exactly. And it is great that I think someone like Frank Henenlotter has his movies available. He has his films available like this so people can see them. I think it's for younger generations to see them, but also for us, the older generations. I mean, I think I don't have a lot of physical media just because we don't have a lot of room in our apartment, but I do think like for people that collect, this is one of the ones that people collect, and yeah, it's one of the classics, and it is one of the classics for a reason.
Totally recommend it movie.
Yeah.
I think like Basket Case, Brain Damage, and this one are probably the top three
Yeah.
of his filmography. But yeah, it's still a fun movie to this day. I watch it, I laugh at it, it's goofy, and just have a good time. I think more movies need to do that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So yeah, as we're wrapping up here, Freddie, anything that you wanted to plug, or where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Fred the Wolf, same as Instagram. I have a website, fullmoonreviews.net. I sometimes blog on it. It's been a while. I just need the motivation. Just life gets in the way. Sometimes you just can't really write. So I'm glad to be on the podcast with you talking about this movie because I really wanted to talk about it for the longest time, especially after I watched Poor Things. Like I say, I recommend that movie. Watch it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of similarities. And yeah, I say I totally recommend this movie. It's awesome, and you want boobs and fun and mannequins blowing up, and
Yes.
don't get offended by a man also now transgender at the end of it.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, no, everything about this is great. It's a whole total fun time. So I totally agree. And yeah, no, thank you for coming on. And also, I'll say about your site. I know Full Moon's, like you're saying, you don't always update it, but you have a lot of great reviews from the past of
Yes.
movies like
Yeah.
these that people can go to, especially if you're looking for more of these kinds of movies. You have plans to do more of these. Definitely go into your site, and the link will be in the podcast description, so people will be able to
Yeah,
find
I
it.
plan on doing more reviews. Don't worry about it. I'm just, I'm taking my time figuring out what I want to review now. I back in the day, I feel like I had to review everything.
Right.
And
Yes.
now I'm just like, I'm just gonna pick and choose what I want to write
It's the
about.
only way you can do it now. That's why I go
Yeah.
like one movie a week is it's can sometimes be enough. And
Like I
yeah.
just watched the first Omen. I'm like, I want to write about this. I'm like, do I really want to write about this? I mean, I enjoyed the movie, but I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I,
you know what it is? I think sometimes like we were talking about with bad movies, that almost like the review is almost like getting lemonade from the lemons.
yeah,
You
it's
know?
easier to write a bad movie. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah,
Really
you
good,
feel
really great movies easier to write too. Like you praising the hell out of it. Uh,
yes, yeah, exactly. But if it's kind of in the middle there,
yeah,
yeah, it is one of those things. And like you said, you only have so much time and so much energy to write that
and
yeah,
then explain why I don't like a certain aspect of it. It's like
yeah,
I like this, but I don't really like. It becomes like too long at that point. Like okay,
yeah,
just
yeah.
it's a good movie, watch it. I didn't like this, I didn't like that,
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. Well, I think it's where Letterbox. I know you
Mm,
put reviews on Letterbox. I
yeah,
know a few other people do that as well, because it's like you're kind of confined. Like you just give it the
yeah.
stars and you give it a couple paragraphs and you're good.
And if you have my Instagram, I post like if I watch a new movie, I'll probably do a short review on it on my stories.
Oh,
So
right. Yes, that's right.
it's easier that way. Just like oh, I like this, the acting was good, the direction was good.
Yeah.
Watch it. You know what I mean? There's been a lot of good movies this year. I just don't really have the urge to write about them.
Yeah, it happens. It happens for sure. Well, but I'll still put the link to your or people will be able to find the link to your blog, at least in the podcast description. But yeah, thank you again for coming on, Freddie. This was a really fun conversation.
Really was. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely,
It's
and
now
thank you.
10 years again to talk.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be much sooner this time for sure. Well, we've got there's plenty of other stuff on Tubi we can definitely pull from, which is gonna be good. So yeah, we'll be 10 years for the next time for you to come on for sure.
Cool.
All right. Thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye everyone.
Direct to video,